Soulstone, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Hey! Didn't realize that was possible?
Thankfully, I had help.
Still, that's amazing.
Brontes had studied soulstones his entire life, and he was beginning to admire the two brothers for being able to handle it.
Do you think you can use its power?
Yeon-woo shook his head.
There's a big difference between handling it and wielding it. But I think if I continue researching, I might be able to someday.
Yeon-woo felt the philosopher's stone weight next to his heart.
It was vibrating normally, as though he'd never absorbed all that energy. He couldn't sense any differences at all until he used it as a core to move magic power. His magic power was stronger than ever, and just by the flow of the magic circuit, he felt all his senses sharpen and the three factors draconic, divine, and demonic activate. The quality of his magic power couldn't even be compared to what it had previously been. Could it even be called magic power considering how pure and concentrated it was, as sticky as the darkness in the void? It was completely different, and he thought about giving it another name. Later, gathering magic power in his hands, he smiled faintly. This is enough. Clearing away his thoughts, he said to Hanova and Brahm, who were still looking at him concernedly. There's someone I want to introduce to you to. Would you like to meet him? The two tilted their heads at the nonsense he was spouting. Hanova frowned and touched Yeon-woo's forehead. Do you have a fever?
No, sir.
Then what? Before Hanova finished speaking, Yeon-woo pushed the magic power in his hands into the pocket watch. Whoosh! The stopped hands began to whirl around and vibrate. Black letters began to float above the watch glass. The letters inside the diary came out and swirled around him before they began to gather and turn into the shape of a human. The clearer his facial features grew, the greater the number of emotions that flashed across Brahms and Hanova's faces. First, they looked interested, then curious, then suspicious, and then in a sudden rush, shock, certainty, and joy. Why you? Hanova was so shocked that he almost fell over. When the letters finished forming Jeon-woo's face, he looked around and smiled mischievously at Hanova. Old man, long time no see? Clang! The hammer in Hanova's hand dropped to the floor as tears trickled from the wrinkled corners of his eyes. He was looking at the face that he missed and hated so much. Is it really you? Goodness! Our old man must be losing his eyesight due to old age. How can you be so nearsighted already? Wait, my face is pretty memorable, then that means, do you already have dementia? I see it really is you after hearing your blabbering on. Hanova fumbled with his short arms and pulled Jeong-woo to him. Gosh, why are you being so embarrassing? Jeong-woo talked like he was going to push Hanova away, but he returned Hanova's hug with a grin. He had also missed Hanova, the only person who never left his side throughout the endless cycle of dreams. He truly was like a father. Brahm looked at the two with reddened eyes, also feeling tearful. He despised his homunculus body during emotional moments like this, but he realized something and looked at Jeong-woo with his head cocked. Finally his eyes widened and he turned to Yeon-woo. Yeon-woo, did you? He quietly asked through their connection so Jeong-woo and Hanova couldn't hear. Yeon-woo shook his head firmly. Please don't tell them anything. Brahm's eyelids trembled for a moment, but he bit his lower lip and nodded. All right. Understood? I'm really tired. I can take a nap, right? Jeong-woo glanced at Yeon-woo while nodding. Although he was acting fine, he was actually extremely worried because his soul was worn out after going through all the cycles of the benefit. He could be scattered into a basic spirit at any moment, and it was a miracle that he'd managed to preserve his identity in the first place. Although Yeon-woo filled Jeong-woo with black energy, there were limits to restoring a damaged soul. It was possible to raise him to the Gui level, but things might become worse. Jeong-woo knew his condition well, and he was cautious. He was finally seeing all the people he missed, and he didn't want to close his eyes again. But since he was less than a ghost, there was nothing he could do at the moment. Don't worry. Yeon-woo patted his brothers on the head. Although his voice was emotionless, Jeong-woo still felt comforted by it. Okay? Jeong-woo closed his eyes with a bright face. With a swooshing sound, his spirit body scattered, and the letters returned to the pocket watch. Yeon-woo stroked the pocket watch and turned to Hanova and the others. This watch is like Jeong-woo's house. We have to fix it if we want to heal Jeong-woo. All right. I'll help you as much I can. Hanova rolled his sleeves up, asking where they wanted to start. Brahm and the three Cyclops brothers moved busily as well. Yeon-woo assigned them all different tasks, and they fell on the pocket watch to begin repairing it. Thankfully, now that the purple energy had moved into the pocket watch, it was easy to examine it. It was created using Sutra Basia as a foundation. It should be easy to fix. Brahm smiled as he examined the structure of the pocket watch. Sutra Basia was something that he had created, and he was proud that it had been raised to this level. Yeon-woo had seen most of the secrets of the pocket watch when he peeked into Jeong-woo's benefit, so repairing it went faster than when they created Cunning. The exterior is the best. Jeong-woo left the pocket watch often and moved about freely, so full of energy that it was clear all the fears of him not waking up again were unfounded. He poked into what they were doing so much that Hanova, who was trying to understand him as much as he could, exploded. You're such a pest. Go away. Of course, Jeong-woo didn't listen, and it was a relief that he couldn't move too far away from the pocket watch. If not, he would probably wander around the entire holy territory. After that small commotion, the pocket watch was repaired. Tick-tock. Under the clean watch glass, the hands of the clock finally pointed at the right time. The second's hand moved forward, each click evidence that the pocket watch was functioning perfectly. The only number that they left behind was 12 so that its original form wouldn't be gone forever. When I look at this, I realize how much I've missed it. Jeong-woo grinned, rubbing the pocket watch. His smile faltered a little when his finger passed through the pocket watch. He could touch it with his soul power, but the fact that he had died suddenly brought him up short. However, Jeong-woo didn't show his feelings and turned the pocket watch over with a bright smile to look at the familiar letters, JWCAH. When I saw this, I wondered when you would grow up. Yeon-woo frowned. He didn't have any words to say. Back then, he really hadn't known anything, and when he'd tried to study, it had been a horrible ordeal. And then you went to Africa with the military. A lot has changed, hasn't it? Jeong-woo and Yeon-woo had had many conversations after Jeong-woo came out of the pocket watch, and Jeong-woo finally learned what had happened during the time he was gone. He thought many things had changed. 5 years on Earth was a long time, and he was amused at the things Yeon-woo had experienced in the tower. Jeong-woo hadn't really expected Yeon-woo to find him in the Soul Stone since its formation was so complex and its secrets couldn't be unlocked easily. He was surprised to hear that Yeon-woo used the Philosopher's Stone that was in his heart. He hadn't left any information about the Philosopher's Stone in the hidden pieces. In fact, Yeon-woo had accomplished many things on his own, like finding Vigrid and developing the demonic divine dragon body. Jeong-woo thought that even if he hadn't left information behind, Yeon-woo would have grown well on his own, although it might have taken him longer. That's young for you. It was just like Yeon-woo to do that. Young? What? Jeong-woo could finally ask the question he'd been reluctant to voice. What about Mom? Although he hadn't been expecting it, he thought that Yeon-woo would only find him once he reached the 50th floor and gained the elixir. He had been hesitating because he thought Yeon-woo would have returned to Earth to heal their mother right away. While he waited for the answer, his heart thumped in his chest. She left peacefully. In a calm voice, Yeon-woo gave Jeong-woo the answer that he was dreading. Oh? She believed in you until the end. She smiled because she didn't want to look sad when you came back. I see. Jeong-woo clenched his fists. A shadow appeared on his face, and Yeon-woo couldn't read his expression. He pretended not to see anything and turned away. Jeong-woo's shoulders shook, then, he raised his head, composing himself. He didn't look sad anymore, and his determined eyes made it clear that he'd just decided something. I heard that I have a daughter? Brahm had told him already? Jeong-woo didn't seem fazed at all to hear about his daughter. He'd probably come to terms with it and set a new goal for himself. Although he couldn't save their mother, the will to at least save his child helped Jeong-woo get up again. I was a bad son, but I want to be a parent like Mom. Their mother had loved them so much, and Jeong-woo wanted to be like her. So. He emphasized each word. I want to live again. Yeon-woo looked at his little brother. And I want to hug Sha just like Mom used to hug us. Do you think that's possible? Chapter 364. Sky Wings, 2. Jeong-woo's gaze was intense. What you're saying about living again, it's not the same as Brahm's case, right? Yet? Jeong-woo nodded. I want to touch Sha with my own hands. Brahm had originally been a god and used a homunculus's body to move in the lower floors, but he had only moved from one vessel to another. On the other hand, Jeong-woo had always been human, and it was natural for him to long for a physical body. Furthermore, Yeon-woo knew another thing that Jeong-woo wanted. He probably wants to age with them since he hasn't been able to. Jeong-woo wanted to share his affections with Ananta and Schi, to laugh and talk with them like an ordinary family. That was the happiness Jeong-woo wished for. The time they had been happiest was with their mother, and their days had been filled with laughter even though they were poor. Do you think it's possible? Jeong-woo glanced at Yeon-woo cautiously, his usual carefree attitude gone. He knew how ridiculous his request was. It seemed to be something that only happened in legends or myths, and no one had ever succeeded in doing it before. Summoning the soul of the dead or resurrecting a person who'd just died were already infrequent miracles. Jeong-woo had been dead for a long time, and his body had been burned and scattered, so resurrection was out of the picture. Furthermore, Jeong-woo's soul was currently in the worst condition it could be, and even if he went to the beyond, it was highly unlikely that he would be reincarnated. The fact that he can bind souls and handle them is already a ridiculous power. The bitter smile didn't leave Jeong-woo's mouth as he recited his wish. He knew that he was being greedy since it was already a miracle that he'd managed to leave the pocket watch and enter the outside world in the first place. He'd grown out of his spoiled character for a while, but seeing his Hyung had probably made it come out again. Maybe. Hey? Jeong-woo's eyes widened. Is it possible? Really? Yeon-woo nodded slowly. I'm not sure, but there has to be a way, or we can create one. Yeon-woo tapped at the manacle and fetter on his wrist and ankle. Jeong-woo's face stiffened. He had heard of the power Yeon-woo gained as he climbed the tower from a being that Jeong-woo hadn't even imagined while he repeated the benefit and uncovered the secrets of the tower. Yeon-woo was talking about borrowing the Black King's power. The only option left in the Black King's set is the pillory. And to get that, you need Cunning, right? Yet. But Hades won't give it to you easily. Yeon-woo nodded. I need to distinguish myself in battle and receive it as a reward. Agar stares at you and your brother. Shock fills Agar's face. Agar jumps around excitedly and screams. A message from Agar's has arrived. Message, it's come. Finally. Finally. You brothers. Hurry, accept. Agar's messages have been blocked with the authorization of other gods and demons. Why is that bastard Agar's acting up so early in the morning? Ignore him. He's always like that. Agar's has released the block with his authorization. A message has arrived from Agar's. Message, I have a. Messages from Agar's have been blocked for a while with the authorization of other gods and demons. The gods and demons vote on Agar's fate. The result of the vote is unanimous. Agar's ability to speak will be removed for a few days. Agar's jumps around, saying he is being wronged. Vimalasatra is interested in what you'll do in Tartarus soon. Sir Nunnos blesses your spirit, which must be tired from the rough environment of Tartarus. All gods of death watch you. All demons of death watch you. All gods of war hope for your victory. All demons of death urge you to act. Anyway? Jeong-woo shook his head at Agar's, who was still greedy for him. It seemed like he had something to say to him, but it was probably going to be as pointless as usual. I'm only feeling it faintly, but there's a ridiculous amount of them. He shook his head at the number of gazes on Yeon-woo. He had also been the subject of interest of multiple gods and demons and even received love calls from them, but he had never seen so many gods and demons interested in a player. He was speechless at this, especially considering how desperate players were for the attention of even a lower god or demon. And this time, it was the gods and demons who were desperate. He could roughly guess that there were easily 3,000 of them. Just how many powers do you have? Hang on. He opened a window and checked the number of his powers. It's 3,702. No, 3,703. 3,704. It seemed the number of his powers was rising by the second. Although Yeon-woo was nonchalant about them, Jeong-woo was sick of it. Aren't you tired of them? It's tough. Thankfully, my body's holding up. But it'll be hard when you actually need to fight? Yeon-woo nodded. He could endure 900 channelings with his demonic divine dragon body, and he'd even managed to kill Astrius. But now, with 4 times as many powers, it was hard to describe what he was going through. More powers didn't merely mean he had more channelings. He also had to withstand the pressure of more gazes that were beyond the number of powers. If he didn't have the demonic divine dragon body or if his level or his soul were lower, Yeon-woo's identity would have been crushed by the presence of the supernatural beings already. He wouldn't be able to help much if he went to war like this, and in fact, he would be even weaker than when he caught Astrius. You won't be able to distinguish yourself like this? Yeon-woo nodded. He had already decided on participating in the war, and he wanted to resurrect Jeong-woo. He didn't want to only have an opportunity to speak with Jeong-woo for a few minutes or hours a day. He wanted to drink with him the entire night or walk next to him even though they would fight. He also wanted to give Jeong-woo the freedom of being able to walk around on his own. Most of all, he wanted to see his precious niece, Sche, smile brightly. He wanted to see her and Ananta live happily with Jeong-woo. To do this, he needed to take ownership of everything he had and make them completely his own. The hardware is excellent, and the software is nice too. But the size of the good software is slowing down the functions. Jeong-woo clucked his tongue, accurately assessing Yeon-woo's condition. The hardware of Divine Draconic Body was outstanding, and it was what Jeong-woo had hoped for too. Its limits stretched so far that even the tower couldn't calculate them. But there were too many programs and pieces of software. It does seem like you'll be able to calculate it with Dragon's knowledge if you get used to it, but it's not easy. Yet. I can tell. Jeong-woo scratched his head. And the skills from all the hidden pieces are just piled up in there? After learning Aura, Yeon-woo had organized Heaven Wing Mana Control a bit, but he was still lacking, and his other skills like Draconic Divine Eyes and Wind Path surpassed it. So that's why you need my Sky Wings? Yeah, exactly. Yeon-woo knew his body better than Jeong-woo, and he figured that there was only one solution: he needed a system to manage everything. He needed something that would efficiently organize the bits of software that jostled for supremacy and automatically adjust the calculations and processes. He needed an operating system that would efficiently manage all the powers without him needing to input consciousness and amplify the functions of his demonic divine dragon body. Fortunately, he didn't have to look far for one. Since the Sky Wings were Jeong-woo's signature skill, which he'd experienced on the 21st floor, he thought it would be perfect to use as an operating system. Sky Wings was originally a skill that increased the limits of draconic factors and tied them up with traits, powers, and skills. And that wasn't all, it was also the greatest buff skill, which was why its numbering was 002. Although it had been pushed to 003 because of Fire Wings, it was still an outstanding skill. In fact, it didn't even make sense to compare it to Fire Wings. Attack skills and buff skills were so different that it was strange to say one was better than the other. If Yeon-woo could have an adjusted version of Sky Wings that complemented his demonic divine dragon body, he would finally have proper wings. He didn't think it was impossible. Sky Wings was a skill that Jeong-woo made, and if they worked together, he would be able to recreate it and come up with something equal to Wind Path or Fire Wings. The other skills, powers, and traits he had would improve as well, and he would experience explosive growth. Hyung? What? Is your conscience okay? Jeong-woo looked at Yeon-woo with a weary expression. Yeon-woo already had a couple of cheat skills, but he still wasn't satisfied. His Hyung was as greedy as ever. Why would I have one? Yeon-woo snorted, crossing his arms. I have to have all the good things. As expected, your character. Jeong-woo shook his head. Yes. His brother was leagues above him. Chapter 365. Sky Wings, 3. I suddenly had a thought. Yeon-woo looked at Jeong-woo, waiting for him to speak. You're not planning on absorbing me or anything with Bathory's vampiric sword to get Sky Wings, are you? Yeon-woo's eyes widened. Why didn't I think of that? Jeong-woo slowly took a step back. He'd only been joking, and he was disconcerted to see that Yeon-woo seemed serious. The foundation for creating Sky Wings relies on two things, perfect adaptability and my link with Kalidas. Jeong-woo began to explain what Sky Wings was composed of. Yeon-woo's forehead wrinkled. They're both your specialties, though. Yet. That's probably be the greatest challenge when you create this skill? Perfect adaptability was the trait that allowed Jeong-woo to grow so fast. The effect of being blessed by all mana and the ability to use it freely allowed his brilliance in magic to shine. On top of that, his link with the ancient dragon Kalidas helped him to calculate how to use magic power. Put together, the proper use of those two could only lead to a massive development. The link increases the potential of someone's draconic factors and perfect adaptability combines all kinds of skills and magic. So when the skill was activated, a bunch of additional effects followed. Then I need to find something to replace those two. Yeon-woo contemplated the specialties that he possessed. The first one that came to mind was his trait, cold-blooded, which helped him stay rational even in the most dangerous situations. There were times when the skill didn't work well because he'd been too emotional, but Yeon-woo had definitely benefited from it. He'd gained his immunity and resistance thanks to his cold-blooded trait, and the skill he used most, time difference, originated from it. Of course, my body will become unstable if I activate multiple powers, skills, magic, and buffs all at the same time. My mind will grow unfocused, too. But if I had something to help me stabilize everything, it wouldn't blend multiple skills and powers together as smoothly as perfect adaptability, but it might be enough. Now, what could replace the link with Kalidas? Fortunately, an answer quickly came to mind. The Philosopher's Stone. Yeon-woo had seen the purple energy of the Philosopher's Stone that had swallowed the Soul Stone take on so many different forms that it appeared like magic power. If he could pull all of it out, he would be able to use all the powers and connect them as one. He explained his thoughts to Jeong-woo, who nodded with wide eyes. Hey, not bad? Ideas rapidly circulated in his head. That means you can start by applying your trait, activate factors, awaken your dragon body, and finally contact powers? The order would have to be, activation word, cold-blooded, activation of draconic, demonic, and divine factors, amplifying potential, the third step dragon body awakening, magic equip, contacting powers, controlling, manifesting of results. How complicated! Jeong-woo clucked his tongue after picturing the process in his head. It was so complex because Yeon-woo had so many abilities. Things hadn't been this intricate when he'd made it. Furthermore, Yeon-woo's idea was completely different from his, and Jeong-woo was especially worried about the calculations required for each step. It was also too inefficient and would use up too much energy. The problem was that each step was crucial. I think it's important to first look for patterns to help make the process more efficient and create an algorithm. That'll be a lot of data. The more, the better. Yeon-woo began to focus on circulating magic power to gather data. He sat in lotus position and centered all his mind power on the Philosopher's Stone. Brrr. The Philosopher's Stone shook. Although it was unaffected by the purple energy, as soon as it took in Yeon-woo's mind power, it began to spew out magic power, although it couldn't exactly be called magic power since it contained the draconic, demonic, and divine factors, as well as the power of soul stones. Yeon-woo spun all 360 of his cores simultaneously, circulating magic power through Heaven Wing Mana control. Then, something unexpected occurred. It's too fast. Yeon-woo had never imagined that the circulation of magic power in his body would become a problem. It had always been fine even when he progressed through the different dragon body awakening steps and accepted new factors. The Heaven Wing Mana control managed to keep everything under control. But now, things were different. His hardware was unrecognizable compared to before, and there was 10 times more software. The changes incurred by the engine, the Philosopher's Stone, was like transforming a sports car into a jet. Everything was operating on an entirely different level. It was hard to control using a normal system since the speed of the magic power circulation was too fast for his demonic divine draconic body. It would ruin his body before he even managed to do anything. I'll have to take Heaven Wing Mana control apart and reassemble it. Making a processing system for magic power was the most fundamental aspect of circulation. If that went wrong, everything would be messed up. Since he already had the contents to fill a new vessel, he decided it was for the best. Fortunately, it seemed like reassembling Heaven Wing Mana control wouldn't be too challenging. His understanding of internal circulation had deepened when he reached the expert level, and he had real battle experience, the tricks of the Monkey King, the Summer Queen's dragon's knowledge, and Poseidon's factors. He also had the data that Jeong-woo learned through his special benefit and a part of Vimalasitra's knowledge gained from his draconic divine eyes. He had a plethora of information to reference. His personal knowledge overflowed as well. The things he'd learned while creating the Philosopher's Stone and Cunning could definitely be applied to martial arts. It wasn't a difficult task at all to rework all the knowledge in his own way. Time difference. Everything needs to be fixed. From the start, the system messages had always said his demonic divine draconic body was the first of its kind in the tower. Everything his body required would be unique and new. He separated all the parts from each other, and the limits of his power output increased by leaps and bounds. The circuits that circulated the power opened and were refined to move it more smoothly. Occasionally, he had to move the locations of certain bones. Crunch, crunch. There was no hesitation in his movements as he rebuilt his body, as though he were only switching out old parts for new ones. I think it would be better to strengthen this section. The core on this side is circulating abnormally. And it would be better to decrease the function and put cooldown features here. Jeong-woo helped Yeon-woo by advising him through his own draconic eyes. The process was smoother thanks to their connection. Jeong-woo could read Yeon-woo's mind, seeing what he was planning on doing next, and his profound knowledge of soul stones from making the pocket watch made him a great assistant. The 14 soul tones all have different names and traits. It's crucial have to keep this in mind when you're creating something with it. Jeong-woo brought a sharp awl and began to prick Yeon-woo, who was still sitting quietly in lotus position. The awl didn't affect his skin or even leave a mark. Yeon-woo's skin pushed the awl back, but Jeong-woo used soul power to push the awl in, eventually piercing through and making blood drip from the injuries. Jeong-woo proceeded to pierce Yeon-woo with the awl all over his body. Superbia tends to try to overtake everything. It wants to crush what it sees and place it below itself. Yeon-woo's bloody wounds began to look like a tattoo. When the marks covered almost his entire right arm, a strange light flashed from his skin. It came from the rune letters that Yeon-woo had engraved on his bones a long time ago. But what's paradoxical about it is that it seeks an equal hierarchy for everything beneath it. Jeong-woo created a new shape using the tattoo and letters. It was a magic square that hadn't ever been revealed to the world before, the Lotus Sutra magic square. It was something Jeong-woo had designed with Kalidas a long time ago but hadn't been able to finish. However, when he saw Yeon-woo's demonic draconic divine body, he was inspired to finish it right away. This way, you'll be able to control everything equally. The physical functions of your body, your powers, magic, skills, traits, and even thoughts will be centered on the Philosopher's Stone, which will assist them all equally. The Lotus Sutra magic square glowed once more, then settled under his skin to merge with his magic circuit, restructuring his body with the Philosopher's Stone at the center. Heaven Wing mana control and magic circuit skill proficiencies have increased dramatically. Heaven Wing mana control, 71%, 72%, 73%, 91%. Magic circuit, 80%, 81%, 82%, 95%. Congratulations! Heaven Wing mana control and magic circuit have reached the maximum points. All stats related to the skills have increased. Your strength has increased by 20 points. Your dexterity has increased by 15 points. You have gained new revelations related to the skills. The two skills have been interlocked to form a new skill. A superior skill Mana Operate has been created. Mana Operate skill proficiency has increased dramatically to reach the maximum points. A new skill based on your stats is being found. A superior skill Chakram Mastery has opened. Chakram Mastery skill proficiency has. The effects of the Lotus Sutra magic square are being applied. The divinity gained through the assassination of a god event is being applied to search for a new skill. Ding! A superior skill Atman system has been created. Atman system. Numbering. Calculating. Proficiency, 0.0%. Description: breathing is the most fundamental survival action for living beings and connects the external nature to oneself. The air that flows in during this process guides one to space and nature and allows one to have a transcendent identity if certain limits are overcome. Samsara operating. Based on mental and physical abilities, energy is circulated along the endocrine system. Magic power moves freely through 6 large containment areas and the 88,000 small containment areas, making magical adjustments in the connected nerve areas. Multi-lead. Effective reactions are shown by emitting refined energy outside of one's body. There isn't much of a time gap between mental application and reactions outside of the body. The reactions that occur during this time differ according to the type of energy and understanding of it. This is a unique skill. No other skill like this exists in the tower, and it will be bound to its owner. It cannot be transferred or traded between players. This is an incomplete skill, however, it has great potential. Gain a higher numbering by completing it. It was a method of circulating magic power that Yeon-woo had created using magic circuit and Heaven Wing mana control, and it was greatly distinct from the systems already being used in the tower. The Godly Society is astonished. The Godly Society is greatly interested in the circulation method you've created. The Godly Society begins to have more positive feelings toward you. The Demonic Society once again has a discussion about your level. Many gods are deep in thought. Many demons who only had a passing interest in you now observe you seriously. They do not hide their desire in taking you as their disciple. A few gods express concern about the use of the Soul Stone, Superbia. A few demons contemplate how to take care of you. Yeon-woo could feel his body and magic power connecting as one, like pieces of a puzzle coming together. Now that I've found a method that suits my body, I need to gather enough data for a pattern. As he sensed the magic power actively flowing through his body, Yeon-woo awakened the transcendent factors sleeping inside him. Ding! Ding! A god of Agni has taken interest in you. A demon of Baki is amused by you. Current available powers, 692. The number of powers continued to grow. After establishing the Atman system, Yeon-woo gathered data at a quick pace. The system gradually got rid of the cooling time after a dragon body awakening so he could function naturally. At times, his bones twisted because he moved magic through a new route or his cores broke and caused the magic power to jerk inside of him. Whenever he needed to cut off a body part, he didn't even blink and simply healed his body with regeneration. Along with Jeong-woo, he noted each physical change. His concentration was so focused that the spectators felt drained just watching him. It was almost impossible to see anyone experiment on their own body like Yeon-woo. He was like a scientist examining and dissecting a specimen. Thanks to his close examination, Yeon-woo discovered the secrets of the demonic divine draconic body more quickly, and with Jeong-woo's help, he managed to increase the proficiency of the Atman system quickly as well. Finally, his method of magic power rivaled the perfect adaptability trait. When nearly all the data had been gathered, Yeon-woo focused his mind power from his body towards another direction. At this point, there were over 5,000 gazes on him, a result of newly added powers. Fortunately, his body wasn't exhausted at all even with all the different channels. But having them all under my control is another story. The Transcendents looking down at him knew what Yeon-woo was trying to do. They made no attempt to stop him. Instead, it was almost as if they were challenging him to try. A few laughed openly, but others were curious to see how Yeon-woo would do it. It wouldn't be easy, but Yeon-woo was going to make all the powers belong to him under Sky Wings. Chapter 366. Sky Wings, 4. Since the calculating tool is stable now, only the OS setup is left? That's the hardest process. It's not just hard, it's shit. Jeong-woo clucked his tongue. He knew all too well how proud transcendents like gods and demons were. They didn't know how to submit to the will of others and sought only their individual paths. It was a wonder they could even function together in different societies. It was impossible to imagine how they would react to a mere mortal trying to control their power. It was clear that they couldn't be expected to cooperate. Jeong-woo thought that if he were one of them, he wouldn't be displeased and instead, he'd be flabbergasted and amused. But since many were planning to take Yeon-woo as their apostle, he had to admit that he and Yeon-woo had to be grateful that the Transcendents weren't trying to disrupt the process. Jeong-woo shook his head at the difficulty of the task. However, he was curious to see how Yeon-woo would create a new pair of new sky wings, their biggest hurdle. Have you thought about it some more? A little. Nice. What is it? It's probably similar to what you're thinking. Jeong-woo frowned. Stop giving such vague answers. Yeon-woo hadn't changed, and he always took what he needed without giving anything away. He treated his own brother, who was even trying to help him, in this way. Yeon-woo grinned. It felt like they had returned to the past, bickering with each other at the drop of a hat. However, he felt a bit of melancholy at the thought of their mother's reactions if she saw them like this. You go first. I'll use your advice well. Ha. Well, I think categorizing them is the first thing you have to do. Yeon-woo had accepted around 5,000 powers, and more kept appearing either because they'd heard about what he was attempting to do or their curiosity had been piqued by the assassination of a god event. As a result, the powers were all mixed up like bees in a hive. Even though some transcendents were in the same societies or ruled over the same domains, their powers were independent of each other. This was why Jeong-woo believed creating large frameworks that could group powers with things in common together should take priority over all else. I agree. Then what's the criteria for commonalities? Yeon-woo asked with a nod. There's a left wing and a right wing, right? Why not start with that? Gods on the left and demons on the right? Yeon-woo thought it was a good idea. And you split them further from there. Yet. We'll have to think more about how we can group them again, but the easiest is to divide them according to society. Although gods and demons were individualists, they didn't like moving on their own, and those who shared legends formed groups and maintained their powers together. Jeong-woo rationalized that it would be more manageable if Yeon-woo split them into separate societies, and it would also reduce the clashes between powers. No. It's okay, but it's a little, no, very dangerous. Yeon-woo shook his head after considering the idea. Jeong-woo was a bit offended that his idea had been shot down right away. He grumbled with a sulky expression, "Why? That'll only lead to an imbalance of factors." Jeong-woo was about to ask what that meant when he belatedly realized what Yeon-woo was talking about. "Oh. I didn't think of that." The ratio of gods and demons currently in the channels was 3 to 7. The large number of demons was a result of Yeon-woo's path, which was closer to a demon's than a god's. His inclination towards evil could be seen in his status window. Dividing the wings according to gods and demons would only make the imbalance more apparent, and the demonic factors would become the most active of all the three factors Yeon-woo owned. Then what if you adjust the types of powers to a 1-to-1 ratio? A few gods nod in agreement. A few demons explode in rage, asking what that means. The demons who joined the channels relatively late feel anxious. Lower-level demons glare at your brother. Agars laughs at them, shaking his finger. Jeong-woo could feel the loathing in the gazes of the demons but ignored them. However, Yeon-woo rejected this suggestion as well. No. The level of each transcendent is different, so even with this kind of ratio, the weight won't be the same on each side. Also, there's a possibility that my body might be destroyed even if the balance is even. If he listened to Jeong-woo, his body would be divided into two sections, with divine factors on the left and demonic factors on the right. The three-way balance that he had managed to get together would be ruined. Shit. This is too hard? Jeong-woo scratched his head. It was their first time dealing with a demonic divine draconic body, and because there wasn't anything to refer to, it was difficult to figure out the direction they had to take. What are you gonna do? I was thinking about categorizing them according to keywords. Keywords? Yeah. I was thinking of dividing them according to their power. Death on the left, war on the right. The gods and demons of death had been interested in Yeon-woo ever since he was considered the successor of the Black King. On the other hand, gods and demons related to war seemed to have appraised him based on his accomplishments. They had seen their legends in him. He would put the powers of the Black King to the left, and those of his accomplishments to the right. All gods of death are satisfied with your decision. All demons of death are deeply interested in your plan. All gods of war are curious about your idea. All demons of death laugh at the gods and demons with different powers. Agars looks at you with flustered eyes. Agars attempts to message you. The message dissipates as his period of no messaging is still ongoing. Agars becomes unruly from annoyance. Agars' contact has been limited. You're splitting the powers into two categories? What about the ones that don't fit under war or death? You're just gonna throw them all away? The demon Hundun had shown positive interest in Yeon-woo from the beginning, and he was known by the name Four Evils. However, he didn't have any significant connection to either death or war, and it seemed like Yeon-woo would have to discard him. I still have to put them in a group, of course. How? Do you know what the root of a legend is? What are you talking about right now? Fighting. It can be fighting yourself or fighting the world. Or it could be fighting destiny. Well, if you put it that way, I guess nothing can truly avoid war or death. Jeong-woo understood what Yeon-woo was saying. So you're just going to loosely group them like that? Yes, but I'll categorize them even further within the group. Jeong-woo clucked his tongue. Even though it seemed illogical, it was the only method that would ensure a balance between gods and demons, and even the mixed powers would have a category. I wonder if the owners of the powers will like it. They don't have a choice. Yeon-woo quickly scanned through the messages that were blurring his vision. Hundun is silent. Vimalasitra bursts out in laughter, saying it's a fun idea. Sir Nunos wonders where he'll be placed. He asks if there will be other keywords. Nurgle crosses his arms and decides to observe the situation. Ares chuckles. Agni announces he will flip everything over if he doesn't like it. The reactions were split. Gods and demons with death or war as their power seemed to be supportive, but the rest were displeased. A few tried to strengthen their channels to pressure Yeon-woo. However, he had been expecting this reaction and decided to ignore them and proceed. He wasn't going to negotiate those two keywords. With the cast of the Black King in his position, he couldn't abandon death, and war was necessary for him to continue to stack up his accomplishments. If I want to turn my accomplishments into legends, I can't give it up. Yeon-woo had no intention of simply clearing the higher floors and stopping after his revenge. He needed to reach even higher. For that, he needed to make preparations now. Hyung, are you? Jeong-woo realized what Yeon-woo was thinking and shock filled his eyes. Yeon-woo put a finger to his lips, and Jeong-woo nodded, shutting his mouth. However, he was screaming inside. He'd thought the new Skywings would simply function as an operating system, but it turned out to only be the first step in a grand scheme. Jeong-woo decided that he needed to work harder. Hyung is doing this all because of me? His shoulders felt heavier. Because the keyword of each wing was vastly different, they were created separately. They started on the left wing, which would contain the keyword death. The process of creating it was easier than they'd initially expected. They simply used the process Jeong-woo had used when he made his sky wings, fitting it to Yeon-woo's Atman system and adding the Black King's power. I don't know who the Black King is yet, but the gods and demons of death are still following him. What if he centered the Black King's power and bound the other powers to it? It would make control much easier. He selected his first command word as Soul Collector. The skill Skywings, left, is being created. The option of the cast of the Black King, Soul Collector, has been designated as the first command word. The category Death has successfully been connected to the first command word. The powers included under the category Death are influenced by the first command word. The King of Seven Hells looks at you furiously. Nurgle shakes his head with a confounded face. Kasadagarba makes a tense face for the first time. Izanami says he is someone who cannot be resisted. Halfaz sighs with a vexed face. He will cooperate with you because there is no other choice. Ismadava announces he will follow death. Hell has a flushed face. All gods of death speak. Message, you are being impertinent with your foolish greed, measuring out his power and collecting it into a single location. All gods of death speak. Message, if it's possible to gather his lost power and reconstruct it, nothing would be impossible. Message, but if his greatness is stained, beware that death will escape your control and swallow you. Message, you should always keep this in mind. When all the messages stopped popping up, Yeon-woo could feel the 444 different channels combining as one. It felt like twine twisting together to become a rope as the small channels flowed together to become a greater unit. It occurred to him briefly that it was like a cloud or a server, but he quickly focused on the left wing again. Soon enough, there were 444 black feathers in his hand. Chapter 367. Sky Wings, 5. Is it wings this time? I'm making all kinds of things after meeting a strange master in my old age? The Cyclops Brontes shook his head at the 444 feathers that Yeon-woo brought to him. The three Cyclops brothers had been working on restoring the collapsed holy territory and repairing the weapons of Dis Pluto. Dis Pluto's equipment had been depleted for a while now, so they had a mountain's worth of things to take care of. Fortunately, Yeon-woo had a lot of money, and they could replenish goods through Atran. Dis Pluto felt like they had found an oasis after wandering through a dry desert for so long. The annoyed and anxious faces of the soldiers began to brighten as they began to relax for the first time in dozens of years. Their trust in Yeon-woo, who made it all possible, grew by the day. Those who had been dissatisfied with Yeon-woo for breaking Hades' agreement now accepted him, believing that Yeon-woo probably had his reasons. The Titans and Giants hadn't done anything out of the ordinary, and the scout they had dispatched returned to report that there were no strange movements from them. The ceasefire was still going strong, and Dis Pluto now had the chance to reorganize themselves. However, Yeon-woo hadn't appeared in over a fortnight, ostensibly because he was being punished for breaking the agreement. The soldiers couldn't ask for his release since their master's owner was on the line, and so they were at an impasse. Brontes knew Yeon-woo was only pretending to be imprisoned in order to have time to prepare something, but he was still surprised at the feathers. What are these? At first, he thought it was just Yeon-woo's eccentric whim to have wings made, but when he closely examined the feathers, he was beyond surprised. Each feather had an extraordinary weight from a soul pressure that could rip away an ordinary soul that wandered close to it. Furthermore, the feathers emitted a dark and sticky void that Brontes suspected was death. It was something he had already experienced and something that a fated mortal could never withstand. Death appeared in various forms within the feathers: disease, sleep, pain, and a few appeared like the power of a superior divine being that even Hades couldn't treat lightly. Although Brontes had made countless holy artifacts for the gods of Olympus, this power was too much, and it brought to mind pieces of legends being cut off and tossed into a mixture. The feathers were truly pieces of a transcendent. If just one were refined, it could be turned into a holy artifact or even a power. How did Yeon-woo come to have them in his possession? And so many of them, too. I want to use the wing as both a skill and a tangible item, like a weapon or shield according to the situation. If possible, I want it to have the lightness of a bird's wing and actually have the ability to fly. Yeon-woo showed him a detailed blueprint he and Jeong-woo had spent the last few days drafting. The necessary materials and magic equipment were all explained in such great detail that it made one dizzy. Anyone with some knowledge could picture it immediately. Brontes easily imagined the left wing and fell into deep thought. It's complicated. It was more complex than a holy artifact. The feathers on their own were shocking, and incorporating them all into the left wing would be a complicated task. If he managed to follow the design, the wing would be extremely practical. It would have 3 durable layers that would act like armor as it wrapped around the body. The axes and wingtips had sharp blades that could sweep enemies on the ground as well. It has the usefulness of Jeong-woo's sky wings along with the traits and advantages of the fire wings. The fire power that spread along the wings could be a wild card in battle. Aside from those, Yeon-woo included more features. He wouldn't have gone through so much trouble for the wing if he were only planning to use it as a buff-type skill. He hoped it would be a skill, shield, and at times, his hands and feet. I see you're trying to get everything you can out of this one wing. It will be on a different level from most holy artifacts? Is it possible? I'll have to take a closer look to give you a definite answer, but if you do not mind, may I advise you on some things? Brontes had the deep insight of the master blacksmith who had created the 3 greatest holy artifacts. His opinion was more than welcome. Please do. This axis has too many magic squares on it. It won't be inefficient when magic power is put into it. So if you spread this part out and activate it like a cogwheel. As Yeon-woo discussed the left wing with Brontes, Jeong-woo exchanged greetings with Nemesis. I can't believe my eyes. Long time no see, Nemesis. You look so different now. If Yeon-woo hadn't told me, I would never have guessed. However, Nemesis' eyes were trembling in confusion. He had seen Jeong-woo reappear through Yeon-woo's gaze, but he hadn't come outside because he was afraid he had only been seeing things or dreaming. As he floated around in nothingness for a long time, Nemesis had constantly dreamed of the times he'd shared with Jeong-woo, the moments they cleared the floors, fought, suffered, and laughed together. Now that Jeong-woo, whom he'd missed so much, was back in the world, he was terrified to even take a step closer to him. If Jeong-woo disappeared and scattered into light, Nemesis wouldn't be able to hold on any further. You're still quiet? It really is you? Nemesis could tell the person in front of him was truly Jeong-woo. Despite his fears that his heart would explode when he finally saw Jeong-woo, Nemesis grew calmer. He was filled with happiness at meeting his friend, and there was no panic or agitation. He could speak to Jeong-woo as naturally as he used to. Jeong-woo hugged Nemesis and stroked the head that was as large as his body. Enough about me, what happened to you? Did Kalidas send you to the void? Jeong-woo had been curious about this for a while now. He'd turned it over in his head plenty of times, but he still couldn't understand what had happened to Kalidas. After Kalidas had given Nemesis his dragon heart and Jeong-woo his lair, Jeong-woo had seen him return to the embrace of Mana with his own eyes. He hadn't left behind a vestige either, and he was sure it was Kalidas who had sent Nemesis into the void and told him to wait. When Yeon-woo first awakened his dragon body, he said he heard Kalidas saying that he would be waiting in the Dragon Temple. That meant there was some secret information. What happened? Master, and I think Kalidas sent you and the pocket watch back to Earth? Me and the pocket watch? Jeong-woo straightened his back without thinking. This was the secret information. I've been meaning to ask. Nemesis' eyes grew solemn. Ex-master, how did you know the pocket watch would arrive on Earth in one piece? I've always wondered about that. You must have known that for sure if you left the diary behind? For a moment, Jeong-woo was silent. Everything in his head halted as though his thoughts couldn't go any further. Something solid was blocking his thoughts. Nemesis' eyes widened as if he was sensing something after seeing Jeong-woo's reaction. You? At that moment, Brahm's voice spoke urgently in Nemesis' head. Don't say anything, Nemesis. His voice was full of bitterness and sorrow. Nothing? Nemesis shut his mouth, realizing the reason behind Brahm's words. What's up with your face? Yeon-woo tilted his head at Jeong-woo's stiff expression. Hyung, I. Jeong-woo suddenly smiled bitterly and shook his head. Never mind. It's nothing. Yeon-woo wondered what was wrong, but Jeong-woo quickly changed the subject before Yeon-woo could say anything else. How's the left wing coming along? Is it complete? The basic parts are. Yeon-woo moved magic power into the tattoo on his back that Boo had just etched for him. The cast of the Black King is activating. The first command word Soul Collector has been operated. It has successfully connected to Soul Collection. Souls are moving. Magic power has been added. Aura is operating. Output messages appeared one after another, and a crest with a complex design shone brightly through his clothes. The skill Sky Wings, temporary, left, has been activated. Whoosh! The crest shot up with black flames and transformed into a tri-folded wing. The fire was so hot that the air seemed to bubble. Each flame was a condensed version of the wave of fire. Black flame, a black aura with holy fire, magic power, and purple energy, appeared on his back. You're crazy? Jeong-woo looked on with an odd expression. The destructive power of the wave of fire meant that Yeon-woo was basically walking around with hundreds of bombs on his back. It was suicidal to do this. However, Yeon-woo didn't seem affected. As a matter of fact, he had already thought of using his wing to reduce his surroundings to ruins. Thanks to the efforts of the three Cyclops brothers, Brahm and Boo, the wing was stable. He didn't have to worry about his control over the wing. Its greatest disadvantage was that it consumed a lot of magic power. But I'm overflowing with it anyway. Yeon-woo had used the Atman system as a direct circuit to connect to the Philosopher's Stone and his left wing. The magic power of the Soul Stone meant that he wouldn't have to worry about running out, even if he used it all year round. My body won't be able to handle it, though. Yeon-woo lightly clucked his tongue and activated the second option engraved in the left wing. From afar, a server opened. 666 powers have activated. On top of the black fire wings, 444 feathers and an additional 222 he'd gained flashed red, and countless magic squares appeared above Yeon-woo. He had to admit that the fancy effects of the 666 powers were an impressive sight. All gods of death nod with satisfaction. All demons of death sigh in relief, saying his honor wasn't stained. A few gods are shocked. A few demons look at you with stiff expressions. An unrevealed god, one, Olympus, looks at you silently. An unrevealed god, too, Olympus, becomes afraid. Vimalasitra claps with contentment and astonishment at your accomplishment. Vimalasitra hopes to meet you someday. Agar snorts, saying he expected nothing less. Jeong-woo examined the left wing with his draconic eyes. He wanted to take care of any issues that might arise, such as an error in the skill process, a mix-up in channels, or problems with the energy efficiency. Fortunately, he didn't see anything, and any minor snags could be fixed slowly. I think it's good for now. That Black King is an OP character? Probably. Yeon-woo nodded. If it weren't for the Black King's power, the wing wouldn't have been finished so easily. The gods and demons of death had been more cooperative than he expected. Was it because the power of the Black King could be strengthened, or did they think of it as a good opportunity to test his successor? Whatever their motives, the results were beneficial to Yeon-woo. For the left wing, you can just add powers as you organize them and you'll probably be good to go. Now for the right wing. The right wing didn't have a central theme like Black King. Jeong-woo was extremely curious to see what Yeon-woo planned to use as the main core for the right wing. He clearly had an idea in mind, but he didn't say anything and only smiled in response to Jeong-woo's questions. Jeong-woo was about to ask once more when the door suddenly opened and a person rushed in. Kane. Bad news. Yeon-woo put his mask on, and Jeong-woo silently disappeared into the pocket watch. What happened? It was Doyle. Gasp. Gasp. He looked like he had urgent news. Hyung. Do you know someone called Ether? Behind the mask, Yeon-woo's face hardened as he glanced at the pocket watch in his hand. The hands of the watch were still. What about him? Doyle replied with a tight face. He's looking for you. Chapter 368. Skywings, 6. If it wasn't you, then who did it? I already said it wasn't us. Someone's trying to frame us. Who would do such a thing here? Stop with the nonsense and bring that Kane bastard or whatever his name is here. In an agora filled with many busy subordinates of Hades, Ether and Kong growled at each other. Behind them, Victoria, Galliard, and Kreutz looked tense as well. More people began to gawk and crowd around them as the two raised their voices and an intense atmosphere flowed between them. No one tried to pull them apart, and the atmosphere grew worse. Even the onlookers began taking sides. Paneth's party had made contributions a long time ago and gained Pluto's trust, so the soldiers looked favorably at Ether. On the other hand, Yeon-woo's party had replenished their supplies and fixed their weapons for free. When it became known that they had recreated Hades' holy artifact, Cunning, and given it to him, the soldiers looked at them in a positive light, as well. The clash of the two groups would affect Pluto seriously, so the 13th commander of Pluto, Charnelle, appeared with some soldiers in an attempt to calm the situation. He normally would have ignored the situation since the players involved didn't even have a divine level. However, both Yeon-woo's and Paneth's parties were important allies who had killed a god, something even Pluto couldn't accomplish easily. He couldn't take sides either, so he tried to reason things out with them to investigate why they were behaving this way and what had happened before he arrived. Once he had the answers, he could make a judgment. This isn't anything for the 13th commander to worry about. Ether only snorted and refused to answer, as though Charnelle had no right to involve himself. Charnelle's face hardened for a moment, and Ether suddenly realized he'd made a mistake. The commander was one of the leaders of the 13 military units that were Hades' pride and joy. He even had a divine level, which meant Ether wasn't in a position to look down on him. A god of Poseidon looks at you with amusement. Hestia is with you. Demeter is with you. Hera is with you. Feeling the gazes on him, Ether calmed his thumping heart and stood straight again. Fuck it. Yeah, attitude is everything. Since I'm already here, this is the best I can do. The Olympians are with me, so what do I have to be scared of? The Protogenoi tribe had divine blood, but that didn't help them. In fact, they were even mocked by transcendents for being fallen gods. Even when Ether had been a member of Arthea, he had never received this kind of attention. It was part of the reason he tried to switch over to the Devil Army, although he hadn't been able to attract the attention of the heavenly demon and had been caught by Paneth. It was only now when he wasn't even moving of his own free will and was little more than a marionette in a play that the gods granted him their attention. It was pathetic, and he wanted to cry because everything felt like shit. Nothing was going his way, and he was being controlled by someone else. He considered killing himself rather than live in misery like this, but he didn't have the courage to do even that. A dog should just bark as ordered, Paneth had told him. Yes, he was just a dog that barked upon command and wagged his tail when told to. Last night, I received a message to reduce Kane's growing influence within Dis-Pluto and to kill him if the chance arises. Ether thought whatever this Kane was planning was irrelevant to him. Their paths had crossed several times in the past, but nothing big had happened. There were rumors about the 6 new stars, but Kane hadn't been in Ether's sight at all. But now, Ether knew him too well. He was the reason Poseidon had delivered the message. He's the enemy that will be punished. The darkness within the darkness is probably him. However, he and his party are making Dis-Pluto lose focus. We must take care of this first. Paneth had planned to reduce their influence before punishing Yeon-woo's party. However, to do that, she needed him to gather more information about them, such their personalities and how much manpower they had. So, you must step up. Ether had been chosen as the bait, and the 4 gods peeked into his thoughts and actions. Poseidon's gaze seemed especially mocking, as though he detested the descendant of an old god who couldn't give up his past glory even after falling. You must still explain what happened. We'll be able to judge between right and wrong then. The commander calmed himself, but his voice was filled with fury. Ether was finally able to make his case. Khan seemed to have a lot to say, but Ether didn't give him a chance to speak. Ha! Look at this. It's a broken spear. What's so special about it? Would you believe me if I said this spear was fine 2 days ago? It's the divine spear that cut the ankle of Majira while Lady Paneth was killing the god. Charnmel's eyes widened slightly. Majira's death had helped Dis-Pluto greatly, just like Astria's death. So it was a spear that had assisted in the process. I was having some problems with my spear, and I didn't know what to do about it. I heard that Kane's party was talented in repairing weapons. I left it with them since we're allies and players, but it came back like this. No. It was definitely repaired. Charnelle frowned, not understanding what Ether's point was. However, before he could say anything, Ether quickly continued. I'm saying it looked completely fine. But when I was training this morning, it broke quite easily. Charnelle was silent as he finally understood Ether's implication. If he had gone into battle with the spear, his life would have been in danger. Ether continued to act wronged. I thought it was strange, so I looked up the people who'd also had their weapons repaired, but none of them experienced the same thing I did. It was only happening to our party's weapons. Charnelle was silent. My spear isn't that fragile, even though it's been damaged from battle. Who would be able to stay still in a situation like this? Ether threw the spear to the ground. I was just asking them about the incident. But the leader of the party won't show himself, and these people keep repeating that they're innocent like parrots, so of course, I got mad. Ether's heated speech worked and the soldiers around them began to murmur to each other with serious faces. Some debated whether Ether was lying, and others wondered if Kane's party had been planning to get rid of Paneth's party. That's not true. Khan tried to defend his party, but public opinion was already moving against them. Ether pressed his lips together to keep from smiling. Poseidon teases you, saying your acting is unequaled. Meanwhile, Charnelle gripped his head. Things were more complicated than he thought. He'd recently been concerned by the players' growing influence in Dis-Pluto, and their constant skirmishes meant that he had the duty to block them before things spiraled out of control. However, he didn't have that opportunity this time. Both parties had accomplished so much that it was beyond what he could manage. He didn't even know if he could defeat Yeon-woo or Paneth in combat. He couldn't even defeat Hades' apostle, Lam. What should I do about this? He couldn't allow them to fight as they wished. With the broken ceasefire, they didn't know when the titans and giants would attack, so he didn't want to expend energy unnecessarily. Where did Lam go? The situation would be solved easily if Lam, who commanded a unit of players, were here to fix things, but she was busy carrying out Hades' orders. If they can't come up with a proper explanation, we have no choice but to have a physical confrontation. At Ether's words, the party members behind him pulled out their swords. Clang! They were ready to attack Khan at his orders. Khan's face hardened. He hadn't expected they would go this far. Victoria, Kreutz, and Galliard moved for their weapons as the situation grew more serious. However, Khan quickly raised a hand to stop them, shaking his head. Yeon-woo was their leader, and they couldn't fight without his permission. Instead, he released his presence, which he had been hiding the entire time. Whoosh! A heavy smell of blood spread from him, along with a sharp, murderous intent that could pierce one's skin. Ether and the others reflexively moved back in surprise. What kind of murderous intent is so? His eye began to twitch. He never expected the son of the Iron Lion and a marionette of the Devil Army to exude such strength. There wasn't much of a difference between Khan's power and his. It would be best to put that sword back in its sheath. I don't like the smell of blood and iron, Khan growled as he glared at Ether. However, Ether wasn't one to step back. A corner of his mouth curled up, and he spread out his hand, which glowed with light. It was his signature skill. So what if you don't like it? What are you expecting from me? Do you think that'll make me surrender and say I'm sorry? The tense atmosphere around Pluto grew deeper. Charnmel's face wrinkled. He couldn't maintain his composure anymore. It was an act of disrespect to Pluto to pull out a sword in front of him, a commander. Just as he was about to step forward with a shout, there was a sudden explosion and Ether was blown away. Boom! He rolled on the ground for a while as Khan and the others looked at him in surprise. Irk! Irk! Vomiting blood, Ether tried to lift his head. The attack was so sudden that he didn't even know how he'd been blown away. He wanted to see who the culprit was, but his head was stuck back onto the ground by a foot. You dared to raise a sword where Lord Hades is present without his permission? You must be crazy. Lam stepped on Ether's head a few more times so he couldn't stand up. An aura as sharp as her voice whirled around her as she cut off Ether's right hand without any hesitation. She then turned to Paneth's party, deaf to Ether's screams. They stepped back, overwhelmed by her aura. However, they didn't put their weapons down, which annoyed Lam even more. Lam swung her spear, which was drowned in black light, in a wide arc. Their right hands and weapons flew up in the air. Aok! Ah! It was a merciless deed to precious allies who'd helped them several times before, but Lam didn't care. Only Hades' honor mattered to her, and dirtying the reputation of a god she served was unforgivable. To fight in holy territory was to insult a god. It was shocking to see a party who had killed a god before rendered helpless with a single spear. Lam turned to Khan and the other, who stood there with blank expressions. What about you? What are you going to do? Pull out your weapons, too. The three people behind Khan glanced at each other and removed their hands from their weapons. They didn't understand how such a small person could exude a scary aura. Khan's palms were soaked in sweat. After Yeon-woo rushed over with Doyle, he was stunned to see Ether with his head stuck on the ground. He hadn't expected that Ether would be in Tartarus. He'd been planning to kill him the first chance he got. The pocket watch was quiet. Guessing that Jeong-woo probably had a lot of thoughts after seeing Ether, Yeon-woo rubbed the pocket watch and quietly muttered. Don't worry. Jeong-woo didn't reply. I'll make it so his life is yours for the taking.
Chapter 369. Skywings, 7. The protagonist child caused some trouble, Hades chuckled mirthlessly as he rested his chin on his hand, a cynical smirk on his face. Lam bowed after giving her report. Are you planning to let them be? Hades chuckled again. This time, his laughter was full of amusement. If I don't. They have been poking their noses not only in the holy territory but all over Tartarus as well. Isn't it likely that Olympus has gotten a read on the situation here? Anyone who was a general or higher among Pluto knew that Paneth's party had the support of Poseidon and other gods. As the eyes and ears of Poseidon, Demeter, Hestia, and Hera, they were probably reporting a lot of information back. Paneth's party had a flimsy excuse about helping in the war, but it was wrong of Poseidon to break the agreement among the three brothers not to invade each other's territories. Hades had thoroughly blocked any information about Tartarus reaching the outside for the least 100 years. He hadn't even contacted Persephone. However, recently, it seemed that Hades no longer cared about concealing information. He had tried to keep his cynicism under control, but as the war dragged on, it continued to deepen. As someone who had served him for a long time, Lam felt frustrated. Hades seemed to have fallen into pessimism. His strong sense of responsibility would keep him fighting, but she saw his shoulders steadily drooping. When she thought about it, Hades had begun to change when Yeon-woo's party brought Persephone's message to him. For the first time, she saw Hades shaken. At first, she thought it was because it had been a long time since he'd last heard from his partner, but when she thought about it more, that didn't seem to be the reason. She remembered how much Hades had been avoiding Persephone. She'd believed that it was to prevent any information from leaking, but the truth of the matter was that Hades had been quite excessive in avoiding contact with Persephone. Everyone in Olympus and even the entire 98th floor knew how intense Hades' love for Persephone was. It was so bad that Hera even said Hades was a more annoying lover than Zeus, who flirted with every woman he saw. If he was avoiding Persephone, there had to be a good reason. Also, when he'd received Persephone's message, he hadn't been delighted. Instead, he'd sunk into depression, and Lam couldn't help worrying about what happened between the two. Hades' indifference to the conflict among the players made her grow even more concerned. Just a few months ago, he would have promptly punished them for disturbing the peace, but he didn't seem to have the will to do it now. The war with titans and giants has been pushed as far as it can go. Stubbornly refusing external interference isn't the right thing to do either. Don't bother me about this anymore. Olympus will take action soon. Lam was speechless. However, it's true that arguments among players aren't good for morale. Just take care of it as you always have. Lam bit her lower lip. Hades was clearly expressing that he had no desire to interfere in the matter at all. The only upside was that he still trusted his subordinates and was comfortable delegating things to her. Then may I request something of you as your apostle and general? Speak. I'd like the command of 3 corps. A corner of Hades' mouth curved up, and a faint amusement appeared in his tired eyes. Are you going to fight with them? As you ordered, I spent the last few days observing the surroundings of Myeongbyon and Jikongjeon, and I discovered that their defenses are quite weak. Myeongbyon and Jikongjeon were Hades' former holy territories that had been taken by typhoon. Lam's reconnaissance had shown her something important: they can be taken back. No matter how violently the titans and giants attacked, their influence in Myeongbyon and Jikongjeon was weak because those places were too far from their base. Furthermore, the two still had a significant amount of Hades' holy power. Now that most of the titans and giants were gathered near the giant god in preparation for attacking the temple of the king of the underworld, Myeongbyon and Jikongjeon had practically been abandoned. With the enemy's guard down, it was a good opportunity to take back the two holy territories. The Cyclops Arjesh reported that the torch can be restored. This is the perfect time to recover our land. The torch was another word for the sacred fire, the flame created by a great explosion at the beginning of time when space was filled with nothing.
The flame created light and combined with the emptiness to open different worlds and dimensions. Gods were created from the remnants of the light, and so it was important to protect the sacred fire, the basis of their existence. The ones who possessed the sacred fire could earn the great power of ruling the universe, and all the battles, from Uranus to Cronus and then Zeus, were over the sacred fire. When Lucille tried to swallow the sacred fire, it was the anger of all the gods and demons that damned him. However, with Zeus in a deep slumber, the flames of the sacred fire had grown weaker and Olympus was no longer as powerful as it used to be. The sacred fire that was supposed to dominate the titans and giants was slowly going out around them. It was the reason behind Typhon's ability to absorb Cronus. The youngest of the Cyclops had reported to Lam that it was possible to light it again. For the longest time, he hadn't been able to do anything because he didn't have a way of extracting the fire despite having the Soul Stone. However, with his brother's return, a path had opened to them. If the torches in darkened holy territories taken by the titans and giants could be lit again, the holy territories would regain their purpose and Hades' lost holy power would return. Then, with their master's rejuvenation, Pluto would return to full power. Please allow me to do this. I'll lead a unit to reclaim the holy territories. The players need Karma and Poseidon and the others won't be able to refuse because they say they're here to help Tartarus. Even though Cronus' corpse is between the two territories. Thinking of Cronus' gigantic body, Lam nodded heavily. I can do it. Yeon-woo had already broken the ceasefire a long time ago. There was no problem in battling again. Hades wondered if it was alright to send a unit when the soldiers were still recovering, but he couldn't deny Lam's fiery eyes. She's different from me. Unlike their unmotivated master, his subordinates continued to keep their hopes alive. He couldn't extinguish that spark. Do as you wish. And like that, the order for the expedition was issued. Hades' orders were delivered discreetly because Lam's plans required them to move in stealth. She planned on doing everything quickly and secretly. Their own allies wouldn't even know. The 10th, 11th, and 12th Corps participating in the expedition were ordered to be on standby in their barracks. The 13th Corps was also commanded to stop what they were doing and assemble in the barracks. Since he hadn't finished his sky wings yet, Yeon-woo wanted to stay in the underground prison. However, he had no choice but to participate since he needed to complete the cast of the Black King. There's nothing else I can do to get Cunning. And that wasn't the only reason. Ether and the Elohim are bothering me. Yeon-woo clucked his tongue when he saw the barracks split into two opposing groups. One group sided with Ether and the Elohim party members who had each lost a hand due to Lam. They glared at Yeon-woo's party with blazing eyes, blaming them for the punishment even though it had been Lam's doing. Since they'd brought a professional healer, they'd managed to attach and heal their hands, but they weren't appeased. It not for Lam's observant eyes, they would have picked a fight again. On the other hand, Yeon-woo's party laughed at them with disdain, unaffected by their anger. They spent the night explaining that Paneth's party had tried to frame them, and a number of soldiers took their side. Also, with Yeon-woo now out of prison, they didn't need to hold back their hostility since Yeon-woo granted them permission to fight back. For better or worse, there wasn't any enmity within the 13th Corps. Soldiers took sides based on their friendships with the players, but in the end, their identities as Pluto members took priority. Paneth's party knew this too, which was why they weren't making an even bigger fuss, but Yeon-woo knew that wouldn't last long. They're just waiting for their chance. Yeon-woo smirked at Ether and Paneth, who were looking over at them with grim expressions. They might have thought they were being inconspicuous, but with all the channels he was connected to, Yeon-woo would be a fool not to know what was going on. It's so obvious that Poseidon's gaze is with them. Hermes explains that an unrevealed god, 1, Olympus, is glaring at you. Ares giggles saying that an unrevealed god, 2, Olympus, is watching you. The gods and demons couldn't reveal any names because of the system's law of causality, but they could drop hints. Besides, even if they didn't snitch, Yeon-woo had more channels than any other player and was already in the process of creating a server cloud. It wasn't hard to peek into the channel of another player. Poseidon had come to him with more gods, trying to pick a fight via Paneth's party. How could he not know what that meant? Still, Yeon-woo thought it was for the best. He could complete the right wing as they moved, and he needed a place to test his completed left wing. Now he had the perfect stage. It was as if good fortune had entered his house on its own. Ether was reserved for his brother, so he would take something else. Thank you in advance for the meal. He snickered at Poseidon, who would soon feed with him divine factors. Chapter 370. Sky Wings, 8. First, since some of you don't know each other, let's introduce ourselves. At Lam's instructions, the players in the 13th Corps exchanged casual greetings. Hello. Name's Pam. A swordsman. Tordug. Lancer. Say. I'm an archer, and I double as a forward soldier. Technically, the 13th Corps wasn't large enough to be called a corps. Most of them had wandered in for training while they cleared the floors above. However, each player was strong and well known above, and since they'd passed through the 10 gates, their skills were clearly more than adequate. Not only that, they'd improved while fighting with divine beings. Yeon-woo observed their abilities with the draconic divine eyes, revealing only as much of his magic power as he deemed necessary. Paneth. The leader of the Elohim party didn't say anything else besides her name. She seemed certain that everyone present had heard of her. She's the one who killed a god. Had it been Majira? Killing a god not only required skill but also a special talent to transcend levels. Did Poseidon and the others descend or give her something? Yeon-woo wondered what Paneth's hidden card was. He was sure Poseidon and the others gave her something, but he couldn't tell what it was. It was hard to believe Paneth had killed a god entirely on her own. It was thanks to her that the rewards from killing Astrius had been lessened, but Yeon-woo believed she wouldn't be able to do it again. At that moment, Paneth looked at him after saying her name. She looked like she was glaring at him or perhaps indicating that it was his turn to speak. Cain. Paneth narrowed her eyes. Is that really your name? Does it matter? Of course, it does. We need to trust you to have our backs, which we can't do if we don't even know who you are. Cain. I can't say more than that. If you can't trust me, then I'll just drop out. The players were taken aback by his words. There wasn't much time left but he was still threatening to go. Boom. Lam banged her spear on the ground. She looked in vexation from Yeon-woo to Paneth. I'm sure I told you that I'd kill anyone who started unnecessary fights. Do you really want to die? Yeon-woo shrugged, and Paneth took a step back, hanging her head. I apologize. Everyone, listen up. I don't care if you guys love or hate each other, but don't cause trouble in the middle of battle. Focus on the task at hand. After Lam issued her last warning, she looked around to make sure that everyone was sufficiently embarrassed and began to explain their strategy. The place we have to secure is called Myeongbyon. Currently, there are 2 titans there, Toei and Simo. Toei and Simo were titans who couldn't absorb Cronus power, which meant that they were on the lower rungs of the titan hierarchy. Besides those 2, there were only subordinates present in Myeongbyon. Everyone else had been sent to Typhoon. We will raid Myeongbyon with the 11th and 12th Corps. Quick and quiet is the plan. What about the 10th Corps? When we bind the ankles of the 2 titans, they'll move in from behind. Lam didn't explain the details of the 10th Corps' mission, but Yeon-woo understood her scheme immediately. While the 3 Corps are distracting the enemies, the 10th Corps will take over the temple in the center. Is she planning on lighting the torch to awaken Hades' holy power? If so, it was a fine strategy. That's assuming Toei and Simo are easy to deal with. In any case, it was a strategy worth attempting. Since the ceasefire has already been broken, there's no need to honor it. but taking along 30% of their forces and leaving Pluto vulnerable to a sudden attack. Ah, I see. Yeon-woo realized the battle wasn't going to end here. After they take over the temple, are they immediately heading to another holy territory? It's a blitzkrieg. The question is how many torches they're going to light. Pluto had already been pushed into a corner. Now that they had a way to counterattack, it made sense that they would go for broke. They'd be dead anyway if they didn't find a way out of their current predicament. Then, let's go. Lam issued her command and the 13th Corps quickly began to move. Myeongbujin was one of the holy territories closest to the temple of the king of the underworld. However, because Tartarus was so huge, it took a while to get there. Furthermore, they had to take a long route to avoid the subordinates of the Titans and Giants. Tartarus. I've always wanted come here? Jeong-woo clucked his tongue, looking through Yeon-woo's eyes. Since he hadn't cleared all 10 gates yet, the place was fascinating to him. However, the red sky and dying land made him feel like those who stayed in this place too long would end up in a similar condition. But Hyung? What? What are you gonna do now? Jeong-woo's voice was low. Your wings are still incomplete. To reveal your abilities so soon? No, I have to. Yeon-woo grinned. That will force them to either back down or try to stab us in the back. What are you planning? Jeong-woo had no idea what Yeon-woo was going to do. This. Yeon-woo grinned and stepped forward. The soldiers who had been crouching to assess the right time to raid Myeongbujin, looked up at him. I'm taking the lead. Lam narrowed her eyes, a corner of her mouth curving up. You think you're invincible because you killed a god, Enough with the nonsense, and stay on standby. If you're waiting for the 10th Corps, they're already here. What are you talking about? Lam was about to yell at him when blue fireworks exploded in the sky. Whoosh! Boom! It was the signal from the 10th Corps that they had reached their destination and to alert the other corps to begin their attack. Once Lam lit the gold fireworks, it meant that the 10th Corps could make their move. Lam looked at Yeon-woo with surprise, wondering how he'd known the 10th Corps had arrived. Her senses were more perceptive than those of ordinary players, but Yeon-woo's senses were unbelievable if he'd managed to sense the 10th Corps, which was still far away. Then I'll be off. As if he had no intention of satisfying her curiosity, Yeon-woo kicked off from the ground and advanced forward. Ah! Shouts rose in the north and the south. The 11th and 12th Corps had begun their advance as well. Lam got herself together and raised her voice. Everyone, charge! The players ran forward, roaring, including Panith's party, who had been taken aback by Yeon-woo's unexpected actions. Yeon-woo's party also charged, Kreutz pulling out Zulfikar and summoning a turquoise, which symbolized victory, to buff his party members while Victoria drew large letters in the air with a glowing hand. Rune letters scattered as the curse Tartarus had placed upon the living was washed away, and the party's movements grew smoother. Thank you. After he received the bursting effects, Galliard used open speaking to express his gratitude to Victoria. He began shooting arrows with ataraxia, the bow that Henova had made for him in Tartarus when he'd been feeling bored. However, ataraxia's functions were far from boring. It was a one-of-a-kind bow made from branches of the world tree and was superior to most holy artifacts. It was incredible enough to persuade Galliard that he'd been wrong to think good tools dulled a hunter's senses. Above all else, Galliard liked the feeling of the bow sticking to his hand. It was his first time using it in an actual battle, but it fit into his hand as though he'd had it forever. I never imagined a dwarf would help me like this. Elves and dwarves didn't get along ordinarily, but Galliard didn't care about his race's attitude to dwarves. He'd never been one to follow beliefs like that anyway. Twang! Galliard jumped off the ground, thinking he should treat his drinking buddy to some good wine later. He shot up to the sky, dust trailing behind him. He could see for kilometers with his elven eyes, and he focused on Myeongbujin. It was so ruined that it was impossible to tell that it had once been one of Hades' holy territories. The broken walls and the dead land were testament to the negligence of their enemies. Beyond it, he could see titans pouring out of the temple walls. They had noticed their arrival. Should I do it? Galliard grinned, thinking it wouldn't hurt to try to kill a god like Yeon-woo had. Brahm! He shouted the name of his close friend. Brahm, who was below him, pulled out a book with a disgruntled face. I was going to do it even if you didn't ask. After the Book of Mercury was destroyed, he'd created the Book of Jupiter and the Book of Mars, and Henova's touch was evident on them. Whoosh! As he recited a spell, a magic circle appeared under his feet, and golden light glimmered in the air. Galliard felt a profound strength grow in his body. Yes, this is it. He smiled with satisfaction and pulled back the string of his bow as far as possible, then let go. And this was a combined attack the two friends had created, and each arrow was immensely destructive. Boom! 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 The arrow destroyed everything it touched, and the temple walls collapsed on the panic-stricken Titan subordinates. Those who barely escaped being buried alive found that they weren't out of danger yet. Galliard pulled the string of his bow without any rest, and they found it impossible to avoid his attacks. The blasts turned up dirt everywhere, and Yeon-woo's subordinates attacked as well, not wanting to be left out. Dreams, fade away? First, Nemesis appeared in midair to curse their enemies and bless their allies. Fierce cyclones blew around, preventing the Titan subordinates from moving. They were already trying to get outside in such a disorganized manner, and with more paths blocked, they swarmed together at the remaining exits, looking as though they were trying to get through a bottleneck. Shannon and Han Ryeong used this to their advantage. Along with Rebecca, they swung their swords more precisely and destructively than ever. In the air, space tilted and a pair of eyes opened. Die? As Bu regained more of Faust's memories, his abilities improved day by day. With a simple word, magic circles opened one after the other, magic falling like a downpour to decimate the Titan subordinates. The explosions and leaping flames swallowed the enemies, and it was like an orgy of merciless killing. The 11th, 12th, and 13th Corps, which had been running to Myeongbyon, were practically frozen in disbelief. Their enemies were collapsing even though they weren't doing much to help. In fact, if they joined in, they might only get in the way. However, the true disaster hadn't even struck the Titan subordinates yet. Domain declaration. Everyone turned to the source of the deep voice, their eyes widening at the sight of the air around Myeongbyon twisting as though it had been surrounded by some invisible barrier. The Titan subordinates ran around like confused ants, screaming pitifully when they discovered that they couldn't leave the area. Yeon-woo floated in the air over them, spreading out a wing covered in black light. The three-layered wing was so large that it seemed that its black flames could touch the sky. At the exact moment the wing obscured the sun and the 666 powers in the feathers were awakened, a heavy silence fell around Yeon-woo. All the Titan subordinates had dropped dead without even a single cry. Chapter 371. Sky Wings, 9. The silence spread from the battlefield of dead Titan subordinates to the four corps and the Titans. Neither ally nor enemy could understand what they had just seen. What? What just happened? Did time stop? Is it a mass curse? Or a large-scale buff that makes enemies fall asleep? These were logical guesses. The monstrous Titan subordinates were the banes of Pluto's existence. Even if Hades and the generals could handle the Titans and giants, the subordinates would pour out endlessly, attacking even after their limbs had been severed or jumping around crazily even after they were decapitated. They were exceedingly violent, and so before every battle, Pluto members racked their brains thinking of ways to deal with them. And yet those horrible, implacable creatures had fallen like dominoes without even the slightest bit of resistance after one flap of a single wing. It was an unreal and monstrous show of power. It was easier to accept the fact that Yeon-woo had killed a god. At least his mind-blowing martial arts could be assessed, but this was something completely different. The Titans were thinking the same thing. What is that? The Titan Toei wondered if he was seeing things or if they'd fallen under some kind of mass hypnosis. He had no other explanation. It would have to be a mighty curse to affect a divine being like him, but that was more believable than that the subordinates had just died in an instant. He simply had no experience or knowledge that could explain what had happened. The attack of Hades' soldiers was within reason, and it was true that they had been careless. They'd made this mistake in the past, too. He could comprehend their outstanding firepower as well. Hades' generals and apostle had always been acknowledged by the Titans and giants for their skills. But how could he kill them all at once? How? A player had simply appeared in the sky in black clothes and a mask as dark as Tartarus sky. After he spread one wing, the silence of death had overwhelmed the noisy battlefield. His connection with Simo had been cut off, and when he tried to reconnect, he couldn't see anything from the other side. The opposing force had shaken his divine level, and he felt so much pain that it was as though his soul were being ripped apart. However, he was so shocked that he couldn't even worry about it. What was worse was that things hadn't ended. Yah! An ominous howl swept through his fallen subordinates and a hazy fog began to float over the corpses. The haze began to gather up in the forms of struggling humans in pain. It was souls, no, ghosts. It was the ghosts of the subordinates whose divine levels had plummeted. Yeon-woo had extracted hundreds of ghosts and was pulling them to him. The ghosts formed an ashy fog that whirled around Yeon-woo as he slowly absorbed them. At this point, Toei became speechless. This player not only killed them but also controlled their souls? That was the domain of a god or a superior divine being like the gods from the beginning of time or gods of concepts, but Yeon-woo only exuded the level of a player. Toei shivered as he looked at the colossal black wing. 666 individually mighty powers were bound together, spinning like a cogwheel. When he realized what it was, Toei gasped. Hey! Death was looking at him, ready to take his life. It approached quietly, waiting for its chance. The only reason it couldn't come closer was his soul power as a titan. Without it, his breath would be taken any moment. It was a hand of darkness that could bring death to an immortal being, and the 666 gazes beyond the wing froze him in place. He hadn't felt this imperiled in a long time. Toei found himself shaking, but he pushed away his fear. Hades, he managed to choke out. The power to give death to gods, only one being in Tartarus had that ability. Hades is here. The king of the underworld himself had come. That made sense. There was no way a mere mortal could frighten a divine being like him. Toei didn't know what Hades was planning, but he assumed Hades had chosen a player as a lure and was controlling him like a marionette. Hades probably wanted the player to become a war hero. Now that they'd been pushed into a corner, he was using any means possible to fight back. The ability to master the concept of death was impossible unless one was a being of Hades' level. After clearing his head, Toei felt livelier and more composed. He didn't notice that the 666 powers were bound together by another core, or that Yeon-woo's method of controlling death wasn't anything like Hades. He was blinded by his denial. Crunch! Toei ground his teeth. If Hades himself was present, they had no chance of victory. Retreat was the only option. However, as though he had read Toei's thoughts, Yeon-woo suddenly flapped his wing again and dashed towards Toei like a bullet. Boom! Toei's face twisted. It was true he was afraid of Hades, but he wasn't so powerless that a player could look down on him like this. Did he think he was Hades just because he had Hades' favor? Toei decided to kill that player even though he had to retreat. He had to discipline this impudent mortal to keep his honor as a god pristine. However, just as he was pulling out his holy artifact, Yeon-woo suddenly disappeared. Flash! The space in front of Toei opened, and Yeon-woo reappeared. What? Toei's eyes widened. Was it a simple teleportation skill? Or a flashing skill? But techniques that manipulated space were impossible to use without the permission of the owner of the space. Myeongbujin had been the Titan's territory for a long time, and Hades' holy power had been sealed. It was now Toei and Simo's holy territory, and only they had the authority to change the rules. Obviously, neither of them had given this player permission. Then how? Because this place is my territory right now. Yeon-woo read Toei's mind and offered his shocking reply with a smirk. It was only then that Toei realized the rules of Myeongbujin had been temporarily covered by something else. His senses had been muddled after his connection with his subordinates was severed, which was why he hadn't been able to notice it previously. Was it dragon? It was the domain of the old transcendent species that should have gone extinct with the Summer Queen, Bina. No. These are demons? Gods? There's too many. Toei wanted to shout, but before he could even speak, Yeon-woo already slashed his abdomen. Heaven bracket, flame wheel. Boom. Toei vomited blood as he was blown back. The impact was so great that shockwaves vibrated in the air, flames twisting around them. Yeon-woo kicked off the ground to follow Toei, a crater forming under his feet. A deep trench opened below his steps when he began running. Pieces of the Ruyi Bang floated over Yeon-woo and assembled into a spear. Yeon-woo gripped the spear with his right hand and pulled out the grid with his left, combining the two. Click! Black flames blazed along the blade after the two joined. As soon as Yeon-woo caught up to Toei, he dug his feet into the ground and braced his lower body on the ground. Spinning with his arms out like a top, he began to gain speed. With the movements of the one-horned tribe called Thunder Feet and rotating energy, he shot out the spear. 8 extreme swords, Jet Sun, Breakthrough. Vortex. A whirlwind of flames rushed to Toei, who didn't have a single opportunity to block them. He'd only just managed to regain his balance when Yeon-woo spewed explosive black flames at him. The condensed holy fire as well as aura tore through the god's body, cutting, piercing, burning, and leaving terrible injuries that he couldn't protect himself against. However, his misery hadn't yet ended. Black Gubatera. As soon as the blade touched his skin, blood flowers began to bloom. Why? Why does this guy have the Azura King's power? Blood flowers consumed magic power and wore out mental capacities. This power affected gods as well, which was how the demon gained the title of King of Kings and continued to be infamous even after a long period of peace. The grid slashed through his left calf, and blood spurted out only to evaporate from the heat before it could even fall to the ground. However, what scared Toei the most was that death grew closer with each flap of the wing. The touch of the 666 powers had reached his neck and was tightening around it by the minute. The color of the touch that had taken his subordinates from him was growing clearer. He'd seen an illusion, but they really did exist. He couldn't breathe anymore, and he was feeling faint as horror spread from his heart to his mind. Various diseases afflicted him, then poisoning, and all kinds of deaths. The 666 different methods of death unraveled like string and wrapped around Toei's soul. As though they were competing to prove which of them was the best, the 666 powers dug in deeper. Even still, there was no conflict among the powers, and they supported each other, spinning like a wheel to complete the big picture of death. It was at that point that Toei recognized it wasn't Hades' power. It was a more fundamental one of the processes of completing a concept, which was commonly called the domains of gods and demons. He didn't know how this human managed to have all these powers, but one thing was certain, he had fallen into death's trap, and he couldn't escape. The owners of the 666 powers who created the trap were enjoying themselves as if entertained by his death. Nurgle bursts out laughing. Izanami smiles faintly. King of Seven Hells pats his armrest with a contented expression. Ismatava laughs. Halfaz laughs. Hell laughs. Crazy, fools. He expected nothing less from his successors. There wasn't a single normal being among the gods or demons, just beings that smiled with satisfaction at seeing death. Was this why their domains were over death? Krrrk. With that final thought, Toei drowned in the trap. The invisible touch tightened around his soul for the last time, and Vigrid seemed like a scythe of death floating right above it. Slash! Toei's head shot up in the air, blood gushing out like a fountain. Ksitigarba nods with satisfaction. Thanatos nods with satisfaction. Dispater nods with satisfaction. Chapter 372. Sky Wings, 10. Toei's body split into small pieces, which were sucked into the Ruyi Bang. New letters appeared next to Astrius's name. Simo's face crumpled at the sight. Simo didn't even get the chance to approach Toei, and he was driven back by an attack launched at his temples. Oh, dear! How can a god who's been on so many battlefields get distracted? From a distance, Galliard knocked an arrow with a laugh. He'd been blocking Simo from reaching Yeon-woo and Toei, but he couldn't help chuckling at the fact that Yeon-woo didn't need his help at all. However, he was having a great time mocking a divine being. When else would he have the chance to experience such entertainment? This was only possible with the help of Brahm, who had once been a divine being himself, but he was certain now that the distance between divine beings and mortals was shorter than it seemed. Of course, there's a vast difference between these small fries and famous gods. Galliard thought of Brahm's true form, which he'd seen with his fairy eyes when they'd met for the first time. Swoosh! He let go of his bowstring, and dozens of rays of light condensed together to become a single arrow of light that pierced through space. Boom! Simo tried to avoid it, but the tracking feature embedded in the arrow made it turn and follow him wherever he went. He was pushed back step by step. Suddenly, something crashed into him from behind, and he coughed out blood from the impact. When he turned his head to see what it was, he saw Lam with a stony expression on her face. Apostle! It was the last word Simo muttered before darkness burst from Lam's spear and swallowed him up. The holy artifact that Hades had bestowed upon her, Yin Eater, was famous for swallowing enemies into darkness, and its power could kill even a god. With that, the raid of Myeongbujin, their first battle, ended in success. The four corps who arrived looked at the scene in front of them with blank expressions. They couldn't even remember to cheer, unsure what to think of all the strange events that had occurred one after the other. Then, one of them regained his senses and finally cheered. Whoa! The soldiers around him also snapped to reality and cheered in victory. They're really dead, right? Isn't it obvious? They're not even breathing. But how is this possible? There's no sign of any injuries. Pluto's soldiers poked and prodded at the Titan subordinates lying on the ground. They were looking through them to see if there were any survivors, but of course, they couldn't find a single one who was still breathing. Yeon-woo had done something that they didn't have the experience or knowledge to explain. Even if he used a power, what he'd accomplished was still unbelievable, just like the things that divine beings did. It had to be divine ability, not a power. However, since Yeon-woo was immortal, that didn't make sense either. It was inevitable that they would be confused. Even Lam was bewildered. She had lived far longer than most mortals could while serving Hades, but she had never seen anything like it before. Hades didn't take pleasure in revealing his abilities or divine strength, and his body had grown burdened with the loss of more holy territories. But a common player had exhibited this kind of strength. When he spread his wing, he was a different being. It was as though 666 gods and demons had descended. No, it was more like a fundamental concept appeared. She could still picture the shocking scene when she closed her eyes. Even now, she didn't know if the person standing above the altar in front of her was Yeon-woo or someone else. "I'll light the fire now." Just then, Yeon-woo spoke up. Lam returned to reality and nodded. Lighting the torch was more important than satisfying her curiosity about Yeon-woo. Yeon-woo put a lit torch to the copper brazier. The flame looked like an ordinary one, but it was the sacred fire that had appeared when the universe was first created. The Cyclops brothers had managed to extract it from the Soul Stone. Whoosh! The tattered copper brazier tasted fire for the first time in a long while. The glow of the flames instantly repelled the darkness of the temple. Holy power swirled up and chased away the remaining traces of the Titans. In the process, the corpses of the Titan subordinates ignited into crackling flames. The light gathered on the roof of the Myeongbujin, and the entire holy territory grew brighter as though the sun had risen solely for it. They could now see the run-down conditions of the holy territory clearly, but for them, the sight still seemed holy and miraculous. The light grew bigger and bigger until a column of it shot into the sky. Lam could feel Hades' power inside of her awaken and grow. Hades was probably experiencing the same thing to a much greater extent. Just a few more. Lam clenched her fists. She could see an opportunity to turn the tide. If we can light just a few more torches. She tightened her grip on her spear. We will have the stairs to Olympus. That night, 3 columns of light shot into the sky of Tartarus. Before the Titans and Giants could even blink, they lost 3 of Hades' holy territories, Myeongbujin, Jikanjeon, and Liwangjin. Thanks to Yeon-woo's contribution, Pluto was even able to reclaim more land than they'd originally planned. The columns of light from the lit braziers brightened Tartarus, and the 4 corps were able to return with confident footsteps to the temple of the king of the underworld for the first time. Yeon-woo's name never left the soldiers' mouths. Cain! Cain! They chanted it as they marched forward, feeling revitalized with each shout. However, Yeon-woo felt extremely uncomfortable with this. Hyung, you're a total idol. How about we make light sticks for your fandom while we're here? The pocket watch shook with mischievous laughter. Jeong-woo knew Yeon-woo hated being singled out like this. Yeon-woo wanted to grab Jeong-woo by the collar and punch him in the face, but instead, he glanced at the people passionately chanting his name and smiled ironically. He knew what they were so excited about. The only time I actually spread my wing was at Jikanjeon though. Although it was only 1 wing, so many powers were bound to it that it took a lot out of Yeon-woo to spread it. He only opened it once, and for the rest of the time, he fought solely with his own strength. Since his demonic divine draconic body was destructive as well, he was still able to make a difference. I can't use it often. Yeon-woo rubbed the spot where his left wing was, muttering to himself. He could only use it for about 20 seconds at most. The skill was incomplete and still at its beginning stages. He could make it to 30 seconds if he improved it a bit, but he would need a full day or more for cooldown. The problem is whether I can even add another wing. The right wing with the category of war was still being prepared. The grouping was taking some time, but by the time he finished it, there wouldn't be much left to do. However, how efficient would the right wing be if the left wing alone already overloaded his body to this extent? The usage time will grow shorter and the cooldown time will grow longer. It was helpful in skipping an unnecessary battle and going straight to killing a god, but there were too many constraints on it. He needed to improve it a bit more. Is there anything I can do? Yeon-woo raised his head and saw the columns of light connecting Tartarus land and sky. If more of those appear, the severed path to Olympus will open again, right? Yeon-woo remembered one of Jeong-woo's experiences, the Feng Shan ceremony during which an altar was built to connect the land and the sky and invite the god they served to the lower world. It was a kind of shortcut created after Al-Foroni cut off access to the 77th floor and above from the rest of the tower. Al-Foroni brought many changes to the ecosystem of the tower, and Feng Shan was a method of connecting the heavenly and lower worlds. The Devil Army had been able to imitate the Elohim and succeeded in awakening the strength of the great sages' brothers, the 7 great demon kings. Thanks to that, the Devil Army's power in the tower was greatly boosted. Torches were the main tools in a ceremony that created a bridge that pulled Olympus closer and raised Tartarus towards Olympus at the same time. Like a lighthouse or perhaps a signal fire. The Titans and Giants had taken over Hades' holy territories to cut off the connection with Olympus and isolate him. Now that the territories had been reclaimed, Olympus would probably prepare to descend into Tartarus to help. I don't know if it's a good or bad thing for me, though. An unrevealed god, 1, glares at you. An unrevealed god, 2, looks at your wing with shocked eyes. An unrevealed god, 3, discusses your bracelet with another unrevealed god, 4. Yeon-woo could feel the sharp gazes on him, and there were equally displeased gazes from one of the 4 core. Paneth's party didn't try to pick a fight with him after seeing his overwhelming might, but their eyes were filled with envy and rage. Yeon-woo knew they were waiting for their opportunity. He'd have to be a fool not to realize this from the intense glares of the Olympus gods. After his wing of death appeared, the eyes of the 4 Olympians had grown sharper, but it wasn't completely unexpected, considering how much Poseidon disapproved of him using the Black King's power. They probably think they have to stop me from spreading my wings. Paneth's group is probably frustrated by Poseidon's nagging. The more columns of light appeared, the shorter the distance between Olympus and Tartarus became. Poseidon's blessing for Paneth's party was probably becoming stronger as well. Then this is my chance. Yeon-woo believed Paneth's party would attack him during the next battle. In fact, he was surprised that Poseidon had waited so long with that temper of his. Furthermore, Paneth's party had lost many of their supporters thanks to this event, so they were understandably enraged. From Yeon-woo's perspective, it wasn't bad at all. He had been planning on getting rid of those nuisances anyway, but he'd hesitated because of the gazes on him. If he could use the chaos of battle to his advantage, it wouldn't be difficult at all. It was probably what they were thinking, as well. The next battle would be harder than any of the previous ones. Just as Yeon-woo concluded this, someone suddenly shouted. Lamb! The Titan forces are coming closer. It seems they've sent a unit to chase after us. What? Lamb frowned, but this wasn't a surprise. The enemies had lost 3 of their posts in a single night, so they would use any means to get them back. Everyone, get into position. At her command, the 4 corps moved in perfect order, determination on their faces. They hadn't yet achieved much in battle, but today, they would show the might of Dis Pluto, who were called the strongest military force in Olympus. Clack! Clack! As they set up their shields and formed a phalanx, Paneth looked at the quest window that appeared in front of her. Sudden quest/association. Description: 4 of the Olympians, Poseidon, Demeter, Hestia, and Hera, feel a great threat from player number, who is trying to inherit the Black King's power. After deciding that player number has caused disorder in the tower, they wish to get rid of him. You are being given a blessing that equates to that of an apostle of Poseidon, Demeter, Hestia, and Hera. Your aura will call storms like Poseidon, raise earthquakes like Demeter, burn the world like Hestia, and become as sharp as Hera's. This is the godly power that you and your tribe have desired for so long. With this power, eliminate player number in the confusion of battle. All the blessings given will become entirely yours. Condition: association of player number. Time limit. Rewards: 1 Olympus's blessing and grace. 2 Granting of transcendence. Paneth clenched her fists. The gods had given her a quest instead of a simple command. The reward granting of transcendence stood out to her. The power to regain the divine level her ancestors had lost was right in front of her. She had to use every means to claim it. Meanwhile, at the same time, Yeon-woo received a quest as well that was in direct opposition to Paneth's. Sudden quest/survival. Description: 4 unrevealed gods in Olympus are targeting you. Survive. Condition: survival. Time limit. Rewards: 1 Olympus's blessing and grace. 2 Granting of transcendence. Chapter 373. Sky Wings, 11. Gods and demons were like laws of nature. Since they were a part of the system, they had the ability to give quests to anyone, and Yeon-woo knew who had given him this particular one. Athena. Athena looks at you with a depressed expression. After discovering the truth about Jeong-woo, Athena had grown quiet and hovered around him with a melancholy gaze. Was it because she felt apologetic, or did she have something to say? He didn't know what she was thinking, but he was sure of one thing, that she cared about him and his brother. She had given him this quest because she knew Poseidon and the others were after him, and she wanted to warn him. The closer Olympus grew to Tartarus, the more pressure Poseidon and the others would create. However, this also meant Athena and Hermes were closer as well, and she wanted Yeon-woo to endure until then. Yeon-woo laughed. While Poseidon and the older generation were trying to stop him because they were concerned about his power, Athena and the younger generation were trying to protect him. It was an internal division within Olympus. He was more curious than ever about the Black King's identity. The more his curiosity grew, the fiercer his longing for the Black King's power became. If it was a power that even the great beings in Olympus feared, then all the more reason he had to have it. I have to take this power. Khan. Yeon-woo turned to his friend. A questioning expression appeared on Khan's face. Without another word, Yeon-woo shared the quest window with Khan. After reading the description, Khan stiffened and glowered at Panith's party. Then, he turned back to Yeon-woo with an expressionless face. It was the same face that he'd shown while hunting the descendants of the Monkey King in order to save Doyle. Although he was amiable in normal circumstances, that relaxed demeanor dissolved in front of an enemy. What do I need to do? Khan nodded frequently as he listened to Yeon-woo's plan. Look out for that child. From far away, the Titan Iapeto's face wrinkled as he watched Pluto find the courage to get into formation to fight them. Although it was true that he had once been a leader of the Titans under Cronus' rule and he'd been sent here in disgrace, that wasn't the reason for his frown. He was remembering what Typhon had said to him before he left. Child. Yes, the one who killed a god. The player who killed Astrius. Correct. The child who has received the favor of gods, demons, and dragons and possesses their potential. The one that appears like a despicable hybrid but possesses pure blood. Typhon had been smiling in amusement as he spoke about the mortal who'd killed not only Astrius, but also Titans at the three holy territories. Are you saying I shouldn't kill him? Iapetos had narrowed his eyes, not understanding Typhon's intent. Although he followed Typhon because his power was lacking, he never forgot that he was once been a leader of Titans. This was why he disliked when others tried to give him orders, Typhon included. However, Typhon was too enigmatic and tyrannical to refuse. When did I say not to kill him? Then. I'm saying you should observe him. If he's useless, kill him, or if he's worthy, swallow him. If he's too much, run away. Run away? Iapetos felt wronged. Even though he was trapped in Tartarus with most of his former power gone, he was a superior being that couldn't be compared to lowly idiots like Astrius or Toi. He was one of the original 12 Titans, after all. The 12 Olympians, such as Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, and Demeter, ruled Olympus now, but before them, he sat on the throne as one of the 12, along with Cronus. Unlike modern Olympus, which had become just one of the societies on the 98th floor, the Titans had been unrivaled in power in the heavenly world. As someone who remembered the glory days, he couldn't help becoming furious at Typhon's advice that he run away. It was an act of mockery. However, he couldn't express his displeasure since Typhon now held the upper hand. Typhon knew this too and had smirked at Iapetos for not being able to speak up, as if he thought that Iapetos weren't all that different from the gods that Iapetos thought were lowly idiots. Anyway, beware. We wanted the columns to be opened. Gaia's favor is with us. We're not meant to be in this dark Tartarus. Typhon had repeated the words he always said. Olympus is where we deserve to be, don't forget. The columns of light were symbols of humiliation for them, a reminder of their embarrassing history. They were chains that tied them to Tartarus. How much had they suffered to escape them? But now, they were becoming stairs to a new opportunity. If Olympus could descend to Tartarus, it meant Tartarus could ascend to Olympus as well. The titans and giants centered around Typhon weren't fighting just for the control of the vile Tartarus. Their mission was to climb to the 98th floor, where the gods and demons were busy taking sides and speaking about peace and ceasefires. They truly believed that it was possible to take over the tower. Unlike the beings who had been living in peace, they had suffered in squalor for thousands of years in Tartarus. Moreover, Cronus' death followed them like a blessing. "Our brother, Cronus. Please take care of us even in death." Iapetos murmured a small prayer to Cronus' body, which lay behind them like a mountain. It was a small ceremony the Titans always performed before going to battle, a sign of respect to their blood brother and the god of all gods. Just then, Iapetos raised his head, sensing something rushing his way. A black projectile was cutting through the red sky. "Begone!" It seemed like it would stop at nothing. Iapetos frowned. It was the same projectile that had taken Astrius out in a single blow. He was displeased that he was being attacked in the same manner. With a scowl, he directed his power to his hand, and black energy filled his palm. Cronus power which he had stockpiled in his body. He managed to regain a fraction of his old ability as he released the energy. Boom! Iapetos stretched his hand out to meet the black projectile head-on. His hand grew numb, and he frowned even more. The player was stronger than he thought. Was it because he had the weapon of the great sage, who was as impudent as those in Olympus? Iapetos gave up trying to completely break the projectile and summoned more of the giant god's power to flick the projectile away. The Ruyi Bang shot into the sky, parting clouds as it passed. The hole in the clouds revealed a dark and heavy-looking sky. Then a flicked. At those words, storm clouds suddenly gathered in the red sky. Boom! Hundreds of red-black fire lightning bolts struck, condensing into one. They fell without stopping, turning the dark world bright for a moment. The cold air grew so warm from the heat they exuded that it was difficult to breathe. Most lower-level divine beings would have perished by now. Iapetos scowled. With his divine eyes, he could see the different elements in the lightning bolts. Designated enemy, explosion diffusion, and curse contagion? All these powers. And the Azura King's power? You fools must be crazy. Iapetos roared after reading the countless powers within the fire lightning. He couldn't understand why so many powers had been given to a mere human, and he thought the 5,000 gods and demons who had agreed to it were crazy. He couldn't let the fire lightning continue raining down. They would create a huge explosion, and the individual bolts would join each other to devastate everything. On top of that, it was obvious what kind of horrors Vimalasitra's blood flowers would bring. Half of the subordinates he'd brought with him would be swept away. Each of them was an important source of strength to Iapetos, and he couldn't afford to lose a single one, especially since he was waiting to ascend to Olympus. He decided to release all the power that he had been holding in. The giant god's power awakened and expanded his body. A black giant god as large as a column of light appeared where Iapetos had been standing. The giant god grew dozens of kilometers and raised a hand to rip apart all the clouds, sending down lightning bolts. Rumble! The storm clouds tried to push Iapetos away, spewing out more bolts, but Iapetos stood firm and withstood the impact of the bolts. He tightened his hold on the storm clouds, which caused blood flowers to bloom on the surface of his skin. However, he didn't even blink. The fire lightning scattered with no place to go. The Ruyi Bang had already disappeared at some point as well. "Where are you?" Iapetos turned around, searching for the owner of the Ruyi Bang. He'd felt a clear presence earlier, but it had vanished. Where did it disappear to? Boom! Suddenly, Iapetos found himself crashing to his knees. Dust clouds drifted up into the sky. What? Iapetos looked down at his ankles. Black, shadowy creatures were moving busily around his Achilles heel, which had been cut. What do you think? We're hunters, but I've never met a prey as large as you before. Shannon smiled icily at Iapetos. Compared to the Titan, he was just a small fly, but a blade infused with caused enough damage. You dare? Iapetos reached out to crush Shannon. However, Shannon vanished, and Iapetos only managed to leave a handprint on the ground. At this moment, his neck started to feel warm. Boom! Han Ryong had appeared and was swinging his sword around. Iapetos let out a loud cry that shook all of Tartarus. However, the attacks didn't stop there. Strong winds suddenly began to blow, and Rebecca whirled around, a pair of eyes opening in the sky to suffocate Iapetos with magic. Khan and Doyle distracted Iapetos below, Galliard shot his arrows with Brahm's help, and Kreutz and Victoria struck him. Follow Kane. Help Kane. We can kill Iapetos. It's our only chance to fell one of the main Titan gods. Pluto, who had at first been nervous at Iapetos' arrival, followed Yeon-woo's lead. They split into two groups, one to take care of Iapetos' subordinates, and the other to guard Yeon-woo's party. You dare! You dare! Iapetos screamed over and over, attempting to swat Pluto away. Many were injured, but they continued to march forward relentlessly. Yeon-woo's party aimed for the Titan's blind spots to exhaust him. At the point where everyone's face was glowing with hope, Yeon-woo appeared using blink and sent a burst of wave of fire to Iapetos' head, aiming for an A-cup ointment full of imperfections, a key core of the giant god's power. If he pierced it, the Titan would collapse. Just as Vigrid was about to pierce Iapetos' A-cup ointment, the Titan let out a large cry, releasing all of the giant god's power collected in his body. The energy whirled into a storm, heating the atmosphere, and spreading in all directions. It swept away everything in its path, including Yeon-woo and the soldiers of Pluto. At the same time, the waiting Elohim members began to move on Paneth's orders. Go! Chapter 374 Sky Wings, 12. It's time. Paneth gritted her teeth as she looked at her party members, her eyes glinting viciously. Poseidon and the other gods were pressuring her heavily. Poseidon requests you quickly progress with the quest. Demeter gifts a stronger blessing to you and your party. Hestia looks at you silently. Hera watches you in annoyance. When she'd seen the sudden quest window, she thought that her chance had finally come. She had mainly come to Tartarus to search for Yeon-woo on Poseidon's behalf and, on Demeter, Hestia, and Hera's orders, judge whether he was a threat to Olympus. At first, she had wondered why she'd been assigned such a mission. The gods promised to fulfill her tribe's old dreams, but she didn't understand why superior divine beings from a large society like Olympus were falling all over themselves to get rid of a single player. She believed she could kill the player in question on her own. After all, she was a direct descendant of two important families. She was confident that other than the 9 kings, no one would be able to defeat her. In fact, she believed she could match any of the 9 kings as long as she had the blessings of the 4 divine beings. But after fighting Yeon-woo on the battlefield multiple times, she realized she'd been mistaken. He's dangerous. How can a human use divine power? The power Yeon-woo used was something mortals couldn't possess. Even the divine beings of Olympus couldn't touch his power if he used it properly. At that moment, she understood why Poseidon had been watching Yeon-woo, biding his time for a chance to kill him. Olympus doesn't want to see him become stronger. He was a person who'd caused a commotion, storming through the floors and placing first in almost all the halls of fame from the 1st to the 34th floors. She couldn't even imagine how much more powerful he'd grow if he became a ranker, and she was filled with jealousy. It didn't make sense that a lowly human being with dirty blood could achieve something she couldn't. And what about the gazes of the transcendents that followed him around? She had spilled blood, sweat, and tears, just for the attention of the 4 Olympians, but that apathetic-looking human had gotten everything so easily. In fact, she had to admit to herself that Poseidon was interested in her because of Yeon-woo, not her own accomplishments. She hated it. A mere human was so arrogant just because of the power and attention he had lucked into. His power made a mockery of the path she had walked her whole life, and so Paneth wanted to destroy it. She wanted to become the sword of Poseidon, who continued to urge her to kill him. I feel inferior. She had been an elite her entire life, and there was no reason she should feel that way. She needed to get rid of Yeon-woo quickly, and this was her only chance. Pluto's formation had been scattered from the heat wave that surged out of Iapeto's. Iapeto's subordinates didn't fare any better. The entire battlefield was destroyed, but Iapeto's continued to shoot out heat waves. No one in front of him could stand straight. Those who did were shredded by the dirt and rocks that flew through the air. Some were scorched, and others died when their respiratory system was burned and destroyed. The air itself shook, and those who couldn't stand the strong winds were blown away. It was as though the sky had fallen. The only people withstanding the strong winds were Paneth's party members. Poseidon's blessing, opposing storms, is added to your party. Demeter's blessing, epicenter resistance, is added to your party. The 4 Olympians were providing blessings to help them prevail. Although the blessings were limited to the duration of the quest, it was enough to strengthen Paneth's party. Paneth knew the 4 Olympians would have to face some consequences from the laws of causality, but that didn't matter to her. She had no reason to refuse when the gods were practically holding their hands. She also had a clear idea of their target's location. Yeon-woo had faced Iapeto's heat wave head-on, and he was likely on the brink of death now or at least critically injured. Their plan was to creep up on Yeon-woo and cut his limbs off, rendering him helpless enough for Paneth to slit his throat. They had been so sure the plan would go smoothly. However, Paneth couldn't contact any of her party members. What's going on? The plan rested on speed. They had to use the pandemonium to eliminate Yeon-woo and prevent their allies from witnessing their deed. However, none of her party members had emerged, and the dust clouds were so thick that she couldn't see anything. Her senses were being blocked by something, as well. An uneasy thought began to grow as Iapetos lifted his head with a roar. He was now 2/3 the size he had been when he'd first grown, but his aura was still the same. In fact, it had grown more intense and heated than before, as if he were finally unleashing his anger. As the earth flipped over and sandstorms obscured her view, Paneth's sensitive nose finally picked up the iron smell of blood. Blood. It had leaked into the air when Pluto had been swept away, but this time, something was different. It was faint, but she could smell divine blood that came from her party members. Poseidon erupts in wrath, asking what you're doing. Demeter frowns in dissatisfaction. Hestia abandons her expectations of you. Hera abandons her expectations of you. From the messages, Paneth realized that something was off. Just as she was about to investigate, a familiar face appeared through the sandstorm. Lady Paneth. It was Rhosides, her precious butler and right-hand man. He was bloody from head to toe, and he could only gasp, "Run, away." She wanted to ask what happened, but before he could reply, something hit him and he exploded. When the pieces of flesh that had once been Rhosides fell to the ground, a man quietly padded over, sword pointing to the ground. Paneth frowned when she recognized him. "You. I wanted to get you rats with my own hands." Kong growled, revealing his sharp canines. Just like Rhosides, he was covered in blood, but Paneth realized that it was all from her party members. How? Paneth couldn't continue. Her eyelids trembled from shock. They had moved so discreetly, how did they get caught? Aside from that, the intense heat wave had swept over him, but he seemed unharmed. Paneth didn't know Kong could use Bian and even had the highest proficiency in the tower, so she was greatly shocked. Kong kicked off from the ground as if didn't have any reason to answer her questions. His anger at her had already hit a breaking point since Paneth's party always picked fights and tried to stain his party members' honor. Now that they had set the stage, he had no reason to reject his role. Furthermore, the blood sword in his hand had grown as strong as it could be after absorbing all their blood. Blood sword. Rank, S. Proficiency, 75.1%. Description: as it absorbs enemies' blood, the speed and strength of its attacks increases with a ceiling of 350%. Using Bien tripled the strength of his attacks, and therefore, no one could stop Khan. He dashed forward with the blood sword, and Panath retreated in surprise. With Poseidon's blessing, she released. Boom! Fuck, what is this place? Ether frowned, looking around. The party members had been moving to attack Yeon-woo, but he'd blacked out, and then when he regained consciousness, he found himself somewhere strange. He was in a dark place that had neither wind nor heat. However, he could see his body as clearly as though a light were shining on it. Eventually, he decided to walk, thinking something would come his way if he did. If this was a unique curse meant for him, the one who cursed him would eventually act, and if it was just a random curse, it would be released soon. If it was an illusion, his divine blood would wash it away soon, so he didn't worry. Or else, someone might come to help, or not. Shit, he cursed, feeling wronged. The more he thought about it, the more he felt sorry for himself. He didn't fit into the Elohim or the Devil army. He promised himself to live a great life unlike his foolish father, but all he'd gained was the stigma of a traitor and mocking fingers pointing at him. He was a pitiful and pathetic dog. Yes, that was right. No matter how many times he turned it over in his mind, he truly was little more than a dog. Perhaps he was even worse off. Owners didn't abandon a dog if it was loyal. Dogs also received love. But no one loved him. He had nowhere to lay his head on and no one to depend on. Ha ha ha. Fuck. A thought suddenly occurred to him. If just maybe, what if he hadn't turned his back on Arthea? What if he hadn't abandoned Jeong-woo, would he be in a different place in life? I didn't want to be like this, either. Ether covered his face with his hands. No one was watching, but he didn't want to reveal his expression anyway. I didn't want to be like this, either. He wanted to be a hero. He wanted to receive cheers and acknowledgement. He wanted a comrade who had his back. That was all he ever wanted. It seemed so easy when he was in Arthea, but after he left that safety net, there was no one to catch him. People he thought would welcome him turned silent, and those he thought would acknowledge him laughed instead. It was so lonely. He'd once asked himself if he regretted leaving Arthea and thought the answer was no. However, he'd only been lying to himself. He regretted it. He regretted it so much. He longed for the old days when he could laugh without any worries, trust his comrades, accept people's praise and cheers. He longed for the days when he had been a hero. Jeong-woo, I'm sorry. Truly. Why did people only realize the value of something after it was gone? If he could go back in time, he would do it in a heartbeat. Tears dripped through his fingers. Just then, he heard a familiar voice. You haven't changed. Was he hallucinating? You only regret that you've lost the good things in the past. You want to find an easier path because you're having a hard time right now. You're pretending to reflect and regret. It wasn't a hallucination. Ether lifted his face from his hands and shouted with a frightened expression. Who is it? Yeah. That's all you were. I asked you to tell me who you are. It was Jeong-woo's voice, so clear that it was as though he were alive. However, that was impossible. Also, just then, the darkness opened up in front of Ether, and someone walked out of the fissure, a man with black eyes and hair wearing a sacred-looking white armor and wings, as though he'd walked out of Ether's memories. You're... Ether's eyes widened when he realized it wasn't an illusion. His eyelids trembled. I was stupid for thinking you were a real friend. However, there was one glaring difference from his memories. This friend had always smiled at him, but now he was looking at him with cold eyes and an expressionless face. So, I want to erase my foolish past, Ether, Jeong-woo growled. Chapter 375. Sky Wings, 13. When he had woken from his long dream, Jeong-woo thought it was a relief that his suffering had helped his brother. But another thought came to him: if he were back in reality. Won't they be here somewhere? Jeong-woo grinned at the sight of Ether, pale with fear. However, it wasn't a smile of happiness but disbelief. I thought I'd be angry when I saw him again. Jeong-woo remembered the lives he'd endured. Each time he repeated the special benefit, he repeated the bad ending, as well. In the lives where he'd managed to survive past the middle, most of them had ended from his friend's betrayal. He had to repeat the pain of his heart being split each time. Although there were times when they didn't betray him, they were infrequent, and he was always betrayed for the same reasons: greed, desire, hunger for power. The same thing had occurred in reality. In hindsight, he had been one of the reasons Arthea had splintered. He'd turned a blind eye to his exhausted friends and encouraged them to keep climbing for the elixir. Many clans had grown wary of them, but he always ignored them. Then, things ended badly because of the frustrations, annoyances, and misunderstandings that kept stacking up. All the lives that had ended in betrayal were a result of his self-righteous behavior. It didn't excuse the betrayals, of course. City had been concerned about her friends until the end. Cunning cried for his lover. Jean died trying to lift his weary spirits. Not everyone made the same decisions. However, Bahul, Leont, Baylok, Ether, and Viera always chose the same path in both reality and the other lives. They had laughed when they stabbed him in the heart. That was why Jeong-woo couldn't understand them. He wanted to ask them why they did it. Why did they make the same decision in every situation? Why did they turn their backs on the laughter, conversations, tears, and joys of their friendship? Were they happier in the end? However, Yeon-woo had already killed Bahul and Leont, Baylok went off the grid after climbing to the higher floors, and Viera had become a strange god after swallowing Mother Earth, so he had no way to find an answer to his questions. But the heavens were helping him because Ether was still here. He could finally ask someone. Sky Wings. White wings spread over Jeong-woo's silver armor. It was his signature skill which earned him the nickname Heaven Wing. Winds whipped out of him and wrapped around them both. Unlike Yeon-woo's Sky Wings, Jeong-woo's Sky Wings had the extreme potential of dragon factors. Draconic blood heightened his senses to their peak, and pressure pushed down his surroundings. The dragon breath that came spewing out marked his territory. Whenever he spread his wings, no one could compare to him. Boom! Jeong-woo kicked off from the ground, creating an impact so powerful that the darkness shook. He split through the air and reached Ether at a speed that broke the sound barrier. Ether collected himself belatedly. He was flustered that a dead person had come back, but the most important thing was to protect himself. Clapping his hands together, he turned them over and raised them over his head. A thick curtain of light blocked Jeong-woo's approach, or at least, tried to. Boom! The light should have been as sturdy as a barrier, but the Sky Wings' force shattered them like glass. Under the shards of light, Jeong-woo turned to the right, holding a gigantic sword in his hands that shone as brightly as his armor: Dragon Slayer. Dragon Slayer. Category: Double-hand longsword. Rank: A+, *original, X. Description: a sword the master blacksmith Henova made from bones provided by Kalitas. As it is created from dragon bone, it has outstanding durability and magic power conductivity. Beads of auric halcom are studded throughout the sword, amplifying its effects. It's currently stronger than normal because magic conductivity cores have been added. Dragon Catcher. If fighting with an opponent who holds even the slightest trace of the draconic species, the holder of the sword will be able to dominate them. Dragon's Gaze. A high probability of taking health and magic power from an injured opponent. The opponent will be trapped in fear as if they are exposed to a dragon's gaze. The immunity and durability of the opponent will be nullified. Dragon Formula. Magical formulas can be engraved along the blade. The magic will never disappear because it is converted into the dragon language, and only a small amount of magic power is needed for activation. Not only was Dragon Slayer a great weapon, it was also an incredible magic tool. Its durability guaranteed it wouldn't break no matter what type of weapon clashed with it, and the magic engraved on the blade only used a minute amount of magic power, which meant it was more effective than reciting a spell. Draconic was one of the most superior types of magic. A few words could change the laws of nature. The draconic species made it possible because they were blessed by mana, and this was what allowed them to be equal to gods and demons at one point. On top of that, magic conductivity cores had been added, so it had an immense potential for destruction. The Dragon Slayer Jeong-woo had was only a replica, but Jeong-woo remembered all the minor details and functions of the Dragon Slayer, and he'd contributed his knowledge to the creation of the replica. As a result, it was only a few ranks below the original, and its capabilities were outstanding. It was the sword that suited Jeong-woo the best, and it was better than most holy artifacts. It wasn't just the Dragon Slayer. The items he wore, Heaven Crupper, Ogre Power Gauntlet, OPG, Feather Cloud Shoes, and so on were items he'd worn when he'd been Heaven Wing. Jeong-woo expressed his gratitude once more to the person who'd helped him recover his things. "Thanks, Nemesis." "It's nothing, ex-master, I've been waiting for this moment as long as you have." Dreaming Illusion. Nemesis' skill, Dreaming Illusion, trapped people at the border between an empty dream and a nightmare so that Nemesis could weigh them down with emptiness and make them panic. But when it was activated for just one person, it would trap them on the other side of space, where they would be killed. It was a tactic Jeong-woo had used frequently with Myrn, Nemesis' previous identity. When Nemesis properties changed, the environment changed to the brink of dreams. However, Jeong-woo liked it better there because anything was possible if you imagined it properly. Even with a half-broken soul, he could regain his old appearance for a while. Let go of it. All of it. This was a stage that Yeon-woo had made especially for him. Boom. Ether couldn't withstand the attack and was blown back. Jeong-woo flapped his wings again to follow him, swinging Dragon Slayer. It was a skill Jeong-woo used frequently against his enemies. It was ordinarily an ordinary skill, but in Jeong-woo's hands, they shot lightning bolts with a thunderous noise, yellow sparks flickering over the blade. Rumble. When Jeong-woo first created Wave of Light, he could barely control its destructiveness. His friends always ran whenever they saw the skill, and they teased him by calling it a suicide skill. However, as Jeong-woo's ranking went up, his control grew until it became an overpowered skill that destroyed everything. Impossible! Ether screamed as he saw the wave of light and slash rushing to him. He was stunned to see the techniques he'd thought were gone forever. He gritted his teeth and brought his hands down. Light poured out from the tips of his fingers. Slash broke as it crashed into the shards of light. The world of darkness grew brighter and hotter. Jeong-woo laughed in incredulity. White light. You used to say you'd reclaim it from your sister, I guess you managed to get that done. White light was a power that had been lost when Ether's father was kicked out from the tribe after committing a sin. Ether had always hated his sister, Hemera, for taking it and vowed to retake it one day. However, he'd only ever told Jeong-woo this, since they were close friends at the time. No one else knew about it, and Ether's face turned even whiter as his features twisted. This is an illusion. An illusion. It was impossible for a dead person to come back, and this was the only explanation he could think of since his mind had weakened from the stress he'd been enduring recently. Jeong-woo was even more incredulous to see Ether's denial. Think whatever you want. Boom. When the second slash cut through Ether's white light, it ripped towards his upper body. Like always. Ether couldn't move back in time. Lightning was already shooting through his body, and parts of his flesh were exploding. He was going to die, and many thoughts ran through his head. He bit his lips and decided he needed to get out of the dark world first. However, Jeong-woo smirked at him as he planted Dragon Slayer in the ground. "You're the same as ever, running away if things get a little dangerous. Why haven't you changed at all?" Letters from the dragon language floated up as magic squares grew like fruits on a tree. Random fire. It was a skill that used Jeong-woo's perfect adaptability trait and dragon's knowledge to release all the magic he'd memorized, all at the same time. Jeong-woo had saved up an abundant amount of magic in the Dragon Slayer, and when he released it, a magic power storm swooped down. Rumble. Ether had nowhere to run. The brink of a dream was no different from a prison, and anyone inside would be swept away by the magic power storm. When he reappeared, his entire body was filled with all manners of injuries. Even his lungs had been scorched, and he breathed out smoke, gasping as though he would die at any moment. Jeong-woo quietly approached Ether, who was still trying to run away, and stuck Dragon Slayer into his abdomen. Ether flapped around like a butterfly that had been pinned down. Jeong-woo. Ether looked at Jeong-woo through blurred eyes. He had lost most of his vision, but he could still see enough to know that the person in front of him was real. He didn't know how his dead friend managed to return, but there were more important matters at hand. "Save me." Ether gripped Jeong-woo's pants with powerless hands, looking up with pleading eyes. He believed that if he kept on begging, Jeong-woo would let him go because that was the kind of friend Jeong-woo was, kind and affectionate. Ether had spent a lot of time reflecting on it. "We are friends. So, please." It would be different this time. Now that his friend was back, he wouldn't make the same mistake he'd done in the past. Of course, he knew it wouldn't be easy. He had hurt Jeong-woo beyond repair. But if he showed him how sincere he was, even if it took years, then Jeong-woo would open up to him again. Jeong-woo pulled out Dragon Slayer and cut through Ether's neck. Ether's head rolled on the floor, his mouth still begging. What a load of bullshit. He'd wanted to ask why he did it, but now Jeong-woo realized that he didn't need to listen to any excuses. His ears would only rot from them. Jeong-woo stepped on Ether's head with an annoyed expression. Chapter 376. Gigantomachia, 1. Crunch. After crushing Ether's head into pieces, blood and flesh stuck to the bottom of Jeong-woo's shoe, but he didn't even flinch. His cold eyes were still the same. Ha! He looked up at the nothingness, his sigh full of difficult emotions that spun around inside him. He'd thought he would feel better after taking revenge. He did, but it was tempered by the complexity of his feelings. Perhaps he felt numb. Jeong-woo couldn't figure out what he was feeling. He didn't think that the kind of revenge you saw in